Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second night of our summer 2020 special town meeting. I'm your moderator, Bob Hiss. Having been advised by the town clerk that we have reached quorum in our Zoom webinar registration, I'll call the meeting to order. We're going to pick up with Article 6. We have 5 articles to go in our warrant. But first, what I'd like to do is just mention the passing of a longtime servant of the town, Mr. Bernie Lynch. Bernie, I think, was the founder of Milton Cable Access, I believe. I know he was a longtime president of Milton Cable Access. He served on the planning board. He was a longtime town meeting member. And of course, he hosted the extremely popular Election Eve show on Milton Cable Access on our Tuesdays in April. And in addition, I'd like to note that in the best spirit of public service, his grandson, Mike, is here at his post as our Zoom administrator tonight. So I'd like to thank Bernie for his years of service. I'd like to thank Mike for showing up every day. And if we could just have a moment of silence for Mr. Lynch. Thank you. Thank you. With that, we'll proceed to Article 6. Recommended that the town vote to amend Section 10 of the general bylaws known as the zoning bylaws in Section 3Q as follows. In subsection 9D by I, striking the first sentence thereof and replacing it with the following sentences. Off-site affordable units shall be units that are either in single-family dwellings that are owned and occupied by the homeowners, or maybe in two-family dwellings that may be owned and occupied by the homeowners, or leased to one or more tenants. And by striking the words of at least 1,250 square feet and replacing those with the words that conforms to the requirements of DHCD in the third sentence. As amended, Section 3Q, subsection 9D shall read. 9, provisions of affordable housing, type of off-site units. Off-site affordable units shall be units that are either in single-family dwellings that are owned and occupied by the homeowners, or maybe in two-family dwellings that may be owned and occupied by the homeowner, or leased to one or more tenants. The value of any off-site unit shall be at least equivalent to the net cost of the production of an affordable unit on site. Each unit shall contain at least 2 bedrooms, kitchen, dining area, living room, and at least 1 bathroom and a living area that conforms to the requirements of DHCD. New construction shall create the dwellings of similar quality, style, and appearance as other dwellings in the neighborhood. The new construction shall be in decent, safe, and sanitary condition in full compliance with building, sanitary, and health code requirements. Existing dwellings that may be rehabilitated to provide affordable units shall be in decent, safe, and sanitary conditions in full compliance with building, sanitary, and health code requirements. Roofs of existing dwellings shall have a useful life of at least 15 years. With that, does anyone wish to speak to this article? I think I may start with Ms. Cheryl Tagayas. Ms. Tagayas of the Planning Board, if you are there, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This section of the zoning code requires 10% of the units to be affordable, and it requires them to be, those affordable units to be accepted by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development on the subsidized housing inventory. It also requires that the units be home ownership in either single or two-family dwellings. It does allow for these units to be off-site. What the planning board has learned is that DHCD doesn't like 2-unit condominium properties. They have had difficult experiences with those. So they will not accept those. So we have zoning, which has a requirement that can't be met. And so we need to revise the zoning such that it can be met for these units to be acceptable to DHCD. And we can do that by changing the requirement for the units to be home ownership to have 1 unit be ownership and the other to be allowed to be rented. So that's the first change in this. The second change is to align the minimum unit requirement size with DHCD's requirements. So their requirement for a 2-bedroom unit is 850 square feet. So that's the second change that this amendment is looking to make. So with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Very good. I'm looking at my list of attendees. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? I don't currently see any hands. I see one, see a few. Okay, Mr. Fay, Mr. Coyle, Earl Fay, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Earl Fay, Precinct 1. Point of fact, we actually do have zoning that would meet the obligation. The fact of the matter is that the builder would prefer not to do that. The builder would prefer not to have owner-occupied units and preferred not to have those units there. So we're changing it not because we don't have housing available. We're changing it because of agreed requirement of the builder. So I'd like to make that point. We clearly do have it. So we want them to be rentals instead of ownership. Well, that's fine. So let's say what it really is. The other aspect of this that's troubling to me is if we look at the original article has 10 points that's required for the new construction of design standards and so on. So, and that's rather elaborate. But what are the design standards for the affordable units? The design standards for the affordable units are pretty simple. Decent. That's all it needs to be. It needs to be decent and it needs to be sanitary. And I think that's really too bad. I think it's really too bad that that's the quality that we're comfortable with for those of lower income. I do intend to support this. I do have one other question: is why did it take so long to house these folks, and how long have people been living in the development?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, please.
This development, this is talking about zoning, not a special permit. Mr. Fay may be referring to a special permit that was issued pursuant to this zoning, which is at Wolcott Woods at the Carberry property. But that special permit was issued because the application was compliant with the zoning. And so I would point out that it's incorrect to say that the developer doesn't want to do something, because the zoning required ownership, and we know that DHCD has advised that they will not accept a 2-unit ownership. This is something which the Affordable Housing Trust has been involved with. They are supportive of this amendment. And I will also point out that one of the reasons that this zoning was written and the special permit was approved this way to allow these off-site units in 1 or 2 family dwellings is that the zoning requires that the development be for ownership of residents who are 55 and older. And the demand and the need for affordable units is actually for residents who are younger than that. So by having the affordable units off-site, it does allow for families to be the owners and occupants of those units. So Wolcott Woods, the only project that has been granted a special permit pursuant to this article or to this section of the zoning bylaw, is under construction. But it only has been infrastructure to date. So there are no units that are occupied by anyone at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. We also have Mr. Coyle, Mr. Matthews, Mr. Fundling. Mr. Coyle, you're recognized.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Jim Coyle, Precinct 7. I have a general question about this article. The comment from the Warren Committee at the bottom of page 45 mentions 2-family off-site affordable units, whereas the main body of the recommendation talks about single-family and 2-family dwellings. I'm having trouble following how does this fit into the overall zoning of, you know, what in Zone C, for example, 2 families are allowed. So I could see somebody taking a single-family house and making a 2-family to create a rental unit that now only has to be a maybe 850 square feet or 950 square feet, that you could create that. Is that part of the intent here, to create additional units in, let's say, in Residence C, for example, to solve the shortage problem?
Thank you, Mr. Coyle. Mr. Gaius, can you answer that?
When the Great Estates PUD section of the zoning code was passed by town meeting, I think it was several years ago now, there was discussion about whether offsite units made sense, and I think we've talked about this relative to other zoning, and the preference of the planning board moving forward is to require that the affordable units be on site. But when this zoning was drafted and considered and approved, it would allow for those affordable units to be in any district that allows for single and two-family residences. And those are scattered throughout. They're not only in Residence C districts. And it did allow for the developer to acquire an existing two-family and convert it to their affordable units per this Section 9 of the Great Estates PUD. I hope that answered the question.
I still have one. May I have a
Yeah, go ahead. You can, a follow-up question, Mr. Coyle, yes.
Just the, if we end up with more two families on some of the lots are very, very small. And I guess my concern is, well, you know, adding there'll be, if you make it two family, there'll be more vehicles, at least one or two more requests for driveways. Will all the other requirements for setbacks and so forth and driveway permits still be applicable?
I think I can better address your question, Mr. Coyle.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No new two-family would be allowed to be made from an existing single-family unless it met other provisions of the zoning bylaw. And our provisions in the zoning bylaw for creating two families where they don't exist is very restricted. So the likelihood would be that a developer would purchase an existing two-family to provide these affordable units. But they could also do it in single families. So they could purchase single family residences to do it. There's no requirement in the special permit that it be one or the other, but they're not allowed to create something that wouldn't be allowed otherwise within that district.
Thank you, Mr. Gaius. We have Mr. Matthews funneling and then Mr. Fagan. Mr. Matthews, you're recognized.
Yes, this is just a point of order. I know we have a quorum, but I've heard from quite a few members who have not received the link tonight. Are we able to keep going if there are members who have been basically blocked from joining town meeting, from having a chance to vote for their constituents?
Well, we have, first, we do have quorum. We have 178 attendees plus some who are panelists. Second, the Zoom technology takes everyone who has registered and takes whatever email the member used to register and sends out 24 hours in advance a link to that email address. So our hosts have been finding situations where people have been looking in different email addresses than that which they registered with. They had situations where they had missed the link. So if they're notifying if they've registered in advance, we'll try to get them in. If they have not registered, and we have a list of all the registrations, then our team doesn't have time to both manage the meeting tonight and register people who did not do so in advance. And by the way, registration was really due back in June. And so we had a number of members that didn't register even back in June.
Sure, but these, and if I may follow, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Scott
please,
Matthews, Precinct 10, town meeting member. These people that I've heard from have registered. They were in the link, in the Zoom on Monday night, or Tuesday night, and I've gotten 11 notifications today, and a lot of them have gotten none. So something is wrong with it. And I understand we have a quorum, but it seems like it's silencing some members who are representing their precincts from voting if if we're moving forward and not able to let them come in.
Tell you what, let me pause for a moment and just confer with my committee here, and we'll see what we might be able to do. So
Okay.
just stand by. Okay, I've conferred with our IT team here at helping manage the Zoom webinar. So first, Mr. Matthews, if anyone can listen out there on TV and you're a town meeting member and you were registered for this meeting, for example, you could attend on Tuesday, but you can't attend tonight, send an email to Mike Lynch. His email address is Mike, M-I-K-E, at miltonaccesstv.org. So MILTONACCESS TV.org. What Mike can do is he will get your email, he'll get you the meeting ID and password in order to sign in, and then you'll be able to log in, and he can address them pretty quickly. So let's follow that approach. And then I'll be following Mike as we're getting toward the vote. And if he's got a substantial backlog, I'll pause. And if we don't have that backlog, we'll continue.
If I may add one more thing.
Yeah.
The people that I've heard from have done that, and their response has been, we just resent it, and they still haven't gotten it. So it seems as though there's a reliance on just pushing the mass update, but not necessarily double checking the numbers, and calling into the support numbers has been unhelpful to them as well. So I understand this whole thing is new. I understand this is the second time we've done it in the year. I'm just pointing out, it feels like people are being silenced, and I just wanted to bring it up since they can't really say anything since they're not in a meeting. And there seems to be a bit of a technical failure, both in trying to reach out for help and in pushing out to people who have been in the meeting before.
I appreciate your opinion. So we're going to, if anyone wants to contact Mike at miltonaccesstv.org, then we can get them into the meeting. If a member wishes to dial in, we could do that. We're then going to have them identify themselves, verify with the clerk they're a town meeting member, and then proceed. So those are the two steps we can perform at this point.
Okay.
So, but thank you for for raising the point. With that, I think I head back to this article. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to thank Town Meeting Member Scott Matthews for raising that issue. And I'd like to add some additional information to it. So as you just discussed, we're supposed to get the invite 24 hours before the meeting, as many of us did last time. However, today, when I had not received any invite, I did notify Mike, who got on it and sent me the invite. I confirmed that I got it. However, half an hour later, the regular invite showed up. So I agree with Town Meeting Member Matthews of the concern that even if it's one town meeting member struggling to get in, maybe we should wait a little bit so that the word gets out to them. Use your phone, because at least they've got the warrant and they could use their phone. But the second big issue that concerned me 2 nights ago was that I've always used the same email address that's on record, and we're given a password. It never worked, and yet I got into town meeting. I was repeatedly told 4 times that it was the wrong email address or the wrong password, but I did get into our town meeting. So I am concerned if others are getting into town meeting that may not be required to. So I'm raising this to your attention because these are important articles.
Thank you. So what we can do is address people as if they can contact Mike at miltonaccesstv.org. We can get you in if you've registered in advance. Or dial into the phone number. And Mike, can we put the phone number on the screen again for members? Or just repeat it for me now and I'll, yeah. So the phone number to dial in is 929-205-6099. And then you'll need a meeting ID, which is
965
965
1424
1424
6333.
6333.
Password
And then the password is
638
638
161.
161. So if you're watching at home, and you can email Mike at miltonaccesstv.org or follow those instructions, we can get you into the meeting if you're registered. Now, if phone callers come in, all we're going to see is a phone number. We're going to pause and ask them to identify themselves and make sure they're town meeting members. And if they are, they'll remain. And if they're not, then we'll remove them from the meeting so that we preserve voting. Okay. The only other speaker I see now is Mr. Fay. Mr. Fay, you're recognized again.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Earl Fay, Precinct 1. I'm sorry, Mr. Ryder, I thought I would have an opportunity in that first time to have a follow-up question.
No, I missed it. I apologize, Mr. Fay.
That's okay. But, and I don't want to have a back and forth here with Mr. Tagayas, but my point that I'm trying to make is back in 2017, the annual town meeting of 2017 is when I believe the original article was passed. And it was the will of town meeting to pass it as written. And if it was rewritten in some sort of other process, I think that's very unfortunate. The original article was absolutely doable. Off-site units owned by homeowners in a single family dwelling. You could own a single family dwelling. We don't need new language for that. It's a single family dwelling. If the developer was to follow what town meeting had expected, we would have a unit owned by someone, an affordable unit actually owned. It could be a two-family dwelling owned as well, absolutely. But we're talking about home ownership. What we're looking at now is not, in my opinion, what was the will of town meeting back in 2017. And I think it's very unfortunate that we're trying to pass something that was not the will of town meeting back in 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. I also have, I think, Melinda Collins of the Select Board. You're recognized, ma'am. Are you there? I think we put you as a panelist so we could see your video. Ms.
Yes, I see.
Collins.
Okay.
Takes a few seconds to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town Meeting Member Precinct 9. I'm actually speaking right now as a former member of the Affordable Housing Trust and the current chair of the Housing Committee. I think, as we know, it's very difficult to buy homes in Milton, and we're looking to get 6 units to add to the subsidized housing inventory. It came to our attention actually when the units for Milton Woods were being developed, that DHCD would not accept 2 condominium units in a 2-family home. And in order to try to get these units done, it just seemed like the thing to do was to consult with DHCD. And Julie Kramer, who is the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, and Tom Callahan, who's the vice chair, both of whom are in the affordable housing world, did a great job of finding out what the concerns were and negotiating with DHCD to find out, well, what would be acceptable. And yes, you can do single family homes, but we also have 2 families that could be suitable residences, and didn't want to have a chance for those units not to come on because we had to let a 2-family go. So DHCD has said that they would prefer to have that model where you have a homeowner who actually then also is able to rent out a unit as affordable, and we might be able to get something a little more affordable because of that. So while we're not sticking with the home ownership model, it really does add to the inventory in a way that's meaningful for Milton, because we do have a lot of home ownership units, maybe not affordable, but we have very little in the way of rental. And because DHCD has said this is the preferred model, the Affordable Housing Trust really got behind this and hopes that everyone will pass this article, because we need units quickly. People are waiting for housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. I don't see any other hands raised other than Mr. Fay. Now, Mr. Fay, since I'll count your second comment as your follow-up, I'll recognize you for this time again.
Oh, Mr. Moderator, I'm fine. That answered my point. I'm pleased that we're getting a couple of units. I just think that we are in part, at least, caving to the fact that the builder really doesn't want to pony up the money for two units, or build them within the development itself, which would be, as in the new way of thought and preferred way of thought, that they would be within the community. So it's appreciated, and rental is appreciated as well. I just think it should be noted that it was not the will of town meeting in the past. And going forward, I'm very pleased that the planning board has changed to a 12% number and to requiring units to be within the development itself. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. There's no other hands here, but before we go to the vote, just so the members know, I can count, I've got 190 attendees. We have a couple panelists who are town meeting members who are probably at 193 quorum. We closed out at about 205 or 202 at Tuesday night at 10 o'clock, so we're about the same number. I can check with our Zoom administrators. Is there anyone who is, you're aware of, team that are trying to get in that cannot at this point? We're dealing with one person, so we'll pause and try to help them out. Okay, everyone that has emailed our team is now in. I see, do we have some phone numbers on the line now, and have we verified their identification?
We just got the one caller. It was the same caller.
The same caller from last time, so you know who that is. Very good. Okay, then with that, this requires a 2/3 vote. Can we put up the poll, please? All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All those abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit. And if we could open up the phone line. On the phone, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. I'll give it a few more minutes for voting. Okay, we can close the poll. The article carries with a 2/3 vote at 88% yes, 9% no, and 2% abstaining. We can close the poll. Thank you. By the way, I'll continue to let you know how our count is doing as we go through the night, so you have the confidence that members are getting in. So with that, we'll go to Article 7. And just the clerk has reminded me, I think I did declare that we had a 2/3 vote because we had 88%, but we did declare a 2/3 vote. So Article 7. To see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to petition the general court to enact legislation to authorize the town treasurer to invest the town's trust funds in accordance with Chapter 203C of the general laws, or certain sections of Chapter 203C of the general laws, provided that the general court may reasonably vary the form and substance. I'm reading the wrong thing. Let me pause again. Recommended that the town vote to authorize the select board to file a petition with the general court in substantially the following form, provided that the general court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objections of the petition. an act authorizing certain investments by the treasurer of the town of Milton, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives and General Court assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows. Section 1. Notwithstanding Section 54 of Chapter 44 of the general laws or any other general or special law to the contrary, the treasurer of the town of Milton may invest trust funds that are in the custody of the treasurer in accordance with Chapter 203C of the general laws. Section 2, this act shall take effect upon its passage. I'd like to first recognize Melinda Collins of the Select Board. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting member, Precinct 9. As people may remember, if you were at the last town meeting or watched it, the annual town meeting in May 2019, there was a scaled down version calling for a home rule petition for the prudent investment of trust assets in the S&P 100. And I remember a couple of people at the time asking for us to take the article back, study it, and to consider sponsoring an article to adopt the full Prudent Investor Act. And that is in fact what we've done. You see it here before you now, and hopefully it's to everyone's liking, because it really does provide that greater flexibility in choosing investments in order to increase investment diversity, lower risk, and increase returns of the trust funds, at least we hope. So thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? I see no other hands being raised. So with that, we'll proceed to raise the poll and do the vote. It's a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All those opposed, vote no. All those abstaining, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit. And if we could open up the phone. On the phone, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can mute the phones. Okay, we can close the poll. The article carries with 94% yes, 3% no, and 3% abstain. So thank you. We can close the poll. By the way, our count, we are up to 197 members, and I don't think we have anyone waiting because I'm not seeing any mad waving of hands. So I think we have all the attendees tonight that we'll expect. With that, we'll go to Article 8. Now, let me explain a couple things about Article 8. I mailed out to the body over the weekend 2 documents relevant to Article 8. The first was the green sheet, which was labeled as such and is the recommendation of the Warrant Committee. More on the Warrant Committee and the recommendation in a moment. I also emailed to the body some language that had been approved by the Select Board last week that they were recommending as an amendment to the article and its recommendation. This past Tuesday night, the Warrant Committee accepted that language. So the document that is before the body today as the main motion will be the green sheet with the Select Board suggested language. And so that's the language that the Warrant Committee clerk will put up in front of you. So I'll be reading from that, and then I will just have some opening comments to address some questions that came in from members. So recommended that the town vote to amend Chapter 2, Section 1, and Chapter 3, Section 4 of the general bylaws to provide for the electronic delivery of town meeting warrants, election warrants, and warrant committee reports, instead of leaving printed copies at dwelling houses in the town. And here's the new language, beginning on January 1, 2022. Then proceeding, and to remove the obligation of the warrant committee to report on ballot questions and to remove the obligation to deliver copies of such reports to dwelling houses in the town by removing the following text which has been struck through and by inserting the following underlined text into the sections of the general bylaws as set forth below. General Bylaw, Chapter 2, Section 1. And for this point, I'm just going to read the new language. I'm going to ignore the deleted language. The warrants for all town meetings shall be directed to the constables of the town, and notice of such meeting shall be given by posting attested copies of the warrant in each of the post offices of the town at least 7 days before the annual meeting and at least 14 days before any special town meeting, period. The warrants for all town meetings shall be made available to read and download on the town's website. Paper copies shall be mailed to each member of town meeting, each member of the warrant committee, and each elected town official. And any resident of the town who submits a written request to the town administrator to receive a paper copy, this is again new language, on or before December 31, 2021, continuing, and paper copies shall be available at the Select Board's office, the Senior Center, and the Milton Public Library, at least 7 days before the day of the annual town meeting and at least 14 days before the day of any special town meeting. The warrants for all elections shall be directed to the constables of the town, and notice of such election shall be given by posting attested copies of the warrant in each of the post offices of the town at least 7 days before the annual or special election. The warrants for all elections shall be made available to read and download on the town's website, and paper copies shall be available at the Select Board's office, the Senior Center, and the Milton Public Library at least 7 days before the day of such elections. General Bylaws, Chapter 3, Section 4. The warrant committee shall consider the various articles in the warrants for all the town meetings held during the period for which they were appointed, including the various articles in the warrant for the annual town meeting next after their appointment. And they shall report in print before all such meetings their estimates and recommendations for the action of the town in accordance with the procedures set forth in Chapter 2, Section 1 of the General Bylaws. So that's the green sheet before the body, which was recommended by the warrant committee, proposed amended by the Select Board, and then approved by the warrant committee. So a couple comments. A number of questions came in from members after the warrant was printed, and there were principally two. The first was that the original language, if you see on page 47 of your warrant, didn't identify the submitting authority. And Chapter 2 and Section 12 of our bylaws specifies that any article that comes out in the warrant has to have the submitting body identified. So that was one of the variances from process that was pointed out. The second variance was there was obviously no recommendation printed in the warrant. So my point of view on this, let me just explain why that's an issue. You just heard me read some language about how we have to have recommendations printed and made available to the warrant committee, to the town meeting members and the citizens. So what did happen in time is the warrant committee did make a recommendation. It came out after the warrant, but they made a recommendation and they did it before town meeting. Second, we distributed it to the members before town meeting, but the other process variance was we did not distribute copies, printed copies, to all the 9,000 houses in town. So some members have asked me, is this article valid? Should the moderator withdraw it? And my point of view is, and I've consulted with town council, and you're welcome to ask town council for his point of view, is one, I find nothing that allows a moderator to withdraw an article or declare it invalid, and if such power existed, I would be reluctant to use it because I believe it would put way too much authority in the hands of a moderator, scrupulous or otherwise. Second, if you read through the town's bylaws and the Mass General laws, there's no remediation for a process variance. So in my view, this article has now been presented to you as town meeting members, and you're the body in town that is authorized to dispose of it. And I won't put words in your mouths of what you want to do, but this is all, you have all the facts now, you know what the process followed and the process variations were, and it's up to you to now decide what you want to do. So we are going to then proceed to recognize a few members who would like to speak first on this. And if you like, I can have town council also speak. We can even put you on camera if you'd like, Mr. Freitag. All right, then I'm going to pause for a moment and just have a brief consult with Mr. Freitag. So town council just asked me to state a reminder. Even though in the document we sent out and what you saw on your screen, there was a wording change up at the very top in the article can never be changed. Only the recommendation can be changed. I just read the recommendation. And so what I read stands, and what you see on the screen from the words recommended down stand. So with that, I see we have Mr. Funling, Mr. McLean, Mr. Lessing, Ms. Collins, and Ms. King. So I'll start with Ms. Collins, since the select board did submit this. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Precinct 9. As most of you will remember, this article was presented at our annual meeting not long ago and was sent back to the select board for further study as well due to concerns about access. So the article before us still seeks to modernize the town's warrant delivery and save taxpayers money, use less paper, and provide paper copies for pickup at municipal locations around town. But it goes a bit further by allowing for a period, well, actually, it ends up being about 17 months from now, but a year period during which people can opt in to receive in perpetuity paper copies of the warrants and not have to ask for one each time or renew annually. That would be it. So they would be able to get that copy going forward. During this time, the select board, which had intended to do an educational campaign, but we're still looking very forward to getting into that educational piece and making sure that people know and that people can get access if they need it to those paper copies without having to go to a building in town hall. But again, we'll be able to have copies of warrants at all these town locations in the article. So, thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. By the way, speakers are still Mr. Funling, McLean, Lessing, Ms. Agostino, Mr. Coyle, Mr. Walker, Mr. Matthews. So, Mr. Funling, you're recognized.
Thank you. Jay Funling, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I urge a no vote on this item, partly because the Warrant Committee's recommendation was not printed in the warrant, as you mentioned a minute ago. I would like to debate this subject on the merits, but I don't think it would be proper to vote on this tonight because the proper notification was not sent to the town in violation of the bylaws. Now, it may sound like I'm just splitting hairs here, but this is not just a violation of the bylaws technical point. There's a reason this rule exists. This rule is here so that we can have time to talk to our neighbors and time to talk to each other and know what we're going to vote on. And it's especially important with this particular article in this particular meeting, because just last month we considered this, we sent it back for further considerations. When I received the warrant, the paper warrant in the mail, I didn't know what the language would be, but I knew it wouldn't be what the original language was. And so I didn't know what we'd be voting on. I knew it'd be something different, but I didn't know what. I didn't know what we'd be voting on until we got that email on Sunday. I even watched a select board meeting last week, and at the end of that meeting, I still didn't know what the final version would be because it was still being worked out. So, and one other point, especially, and this is unique to this year, we got this information 2 days after the deadline to submit amendments. Now, by the rules of this meeting, making amendments to motions is something that members can do. It's one of our most important rights. So we didn't get the information ahead of time enough to discuss it. We weren't able to talk to our neighbors and constituents. We weren't able to make amendments. The select board, I just saw Ms. Collins say that they're going to try to keep people informed if they don't get printed copies. But this is an example of the system going wrong. This is not keeping people informed enough. I know it sounds like a small point, but I think because the wording was not sent out to the town with enough notice, we should not be voting on this tonight. If we do vote on this tonight, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'd like to recognize Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is Lee Michael McLean, Precinct 10. I want to thank, first of all, the Select Board for bringing this article back so quickly. I know that we had, referred it back for further study, and I was afraid that it was going to go into the dustbin at that point. But it has come back after much discussion, and I really appreciate that. The language here, of course, is substantially similar to what we reviewed last month. And I will note that this, of course, is not the first time in the history of town meeting that an article has been voted on when the warrant committee was unable to print a recommendation in the warrant. So that is not any sort of aberration from our past. But I will just add that this article, to me, makes eminent sense, both financially and environmentally. This is a great change. If we want to tweak it again in the future, we are free to do that, but there's no reason to hold this up any longer. So I urge a yes vote. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Lessing, you're recognized.
Andres Lessing, Uptown Meeting Member, Precinct 8. I had just one question for the Select Board, and in particular, it is with the language that says that this will remove the obligation of the Warrant Committee to report on ballot questions, and I want to understand if this means that we will no longer be hearing the opinion of the Warrant Committee on the articles.
Understood. I'll direct that to Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, can you
Okay.
clarify that? Can we unmute Ms. Collins, or can she unmute herself? She muted herself. Ms. Collins, you're muted.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Linda Collins, town meeting member. Actually, our town council has consulted with the AG's office. It's something that hasn't been done in years, and the AG has actually said that it's not permissible under state ethics laws. So it's antiquated and not something that's permissible at this point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think to clarify, maybe the word ballots, Mr. Lessing, the ballots are referring to the town elections. My read of this is that the warrant committee would still and must consider the articles and provide recommendations on the articles in the town meeting warrant. They're just not going to do so on the ballots any longer.
Okay, thank
Since
you.
I don't see town council running in waving hair on fire. I guess I got that legally right. Okay. Then with that, we have Ms. Agostino, Coyle, Walker, and Denoyer. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
There, finally, it showed up the unmute. Mr. Moderator, there is also an issue when we have these Zoom meetings, when we want to make a point of order and we just raise our hand, you don't know if we want to make a point of order.
If you put according to the rules we read on Tuesday night, if you put point of order into the chat, although I can't always monitor the Q&A, I should say, if you click the Q&A button and put the words point of order in there, the Zoom host will alert me right away that that's there.
Actually, I had done that previously, so I don't think that process is working. If we can, it's a process, but maybe he could have a flag or something to wave at you.
Let me just check and see what we may have missed. Just a pause.
Well, I don't know if it was on this article or the previous one. I think it was on the previous discussion.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure that the team just alerts me. They're sitting 6 feet away, socially distanced, and that I'm alerted there's a point of order. But point taken. Please continue, Ms. Agostino.
So my point of order is I want to review the options with Article 8, and then in order to move along more quickly, I will save my discussion for after the point of order and the process, the procedures ahead of us, because when you mentioned, you had received contacts, and I was one of the ones who contacted you about 6 deficiencies in the article. I think it was a consideration that you as the moderator had power to do something with this, but it actually is every article has to be either voted up, voted down, or referred back. And if you can confirm that, then for the town meeting members.
There's that, and you can vote it later in tonight as the last article. Those are the 4 options I'm aware of.
Okay.
And you can amend it, of course.
or you could amend the article. However, even amending the article has to be within the scope of the article.
Yes.
And I know that Mr. Funley, fellow town meeting member, Mr. Funley, has recommended a no vote. I agree with and this is also under the point of order, in that because I agree with the premise of the article, I want clarification on the fact that we still do not have before us an article. Both of the documents that we received Sunday evening, which has already been pointed out, were not meeting the general bylaw. And it's sadly ironic that we're discussing not abiding by our own general bylaw in order to change it. So neither of the documents received Sunday night, nor the one on the screen in front of us, is an amendment by the selectmen of the article. And and this is directly to the point of order, Article 8, and this is gathering experience from having approved articles for a warrant. An article for a warrant has to specify the general law, it has to specify the sections, it has to detail what the change is. All we have before us is an article on page 47 that is unlike any other article in any warrant I've seen, that pretty much promotes an idea. So the point of order is the article that the selectman needed to submit is not what's in front of us. What's in front of us is the recommendation by the warrant committee, and the warrant committee doesn't submit the article. So the Board of Selectmen's authority to amend this article to this degree would be, under my point of order, out of scope, because there are so many changes that have occurred. And therefore, I'd like you to explain, which I did ask the Board of Selectmen to please themselves refer this back to them, especially since they're talking a 17-month time frame. So if you could please have, town council justify not abiding by our own bylaws, and then the selectmen, the fact that we do not have an article before us that we can even amend. What they're amending here is the warrant committee recommendation.
Okay, understand your question. So I did speak to town council, and I'm happy to recognize them. I read the Mass General laws and the town bylaws today. There's nothing that I could find that actually specifies what must be in an article. There's further nothing that specifies what a good or bad article is, and there's nothing that specifies what happens to a warrant that's printed with an article that fails to comply with standards that aren't there. Now, we do have a tradition. My short time here in the town, there's people with much more experience than I, of writing articles that contain all the elements you just described, Ms. Agostino. But my belief, and I can confer with town council, is the article is what it is, since the select board approved it, and the select board controls the warrant. The warrant committee doesn't control the warrant. Moderator doesn't. Town meeting members don't. The citizens don't. The select board controls it. So they can put the article in somewhat any form they want, which was part of my opening comments. They then deliver it to you as a legislative body in town, and you can decide what you want to do with it, given those 5 options you asked about earlier. And I won't put options on the table. I'll just say it is what it is, and you now can decide. And I have a point of order from some member. Yes, Ms. Agostino, you're still recognized.
Yes, prior to having the feedback from town council, and as you and I had discussed, I might, if they can clarify, and you're absolutely right, as a former selectman, the articles would come before us. But when it comes to bylaws, the amendments of bylaws, it has to be specific, referencing the general bylaw, the sections, the language. So that is very different from just any article. And as an example, I would point out that if, and more importantly, the fact that it did not let the town residents, all 14 days ahead of time, let all town residents know who was even submitting the article. So residents didn't know, oh, this was the Board of Selectmen, and that's who I should contact if I have questions. We do have a lot of time, though. That's good that, they're looking at 17 months out. but more importantly is the issue that if the selectmen received an article from 10 residents and only 9 residents signed it, it'd be against our bylaws for that to go forward. The same way, if you're amending a general bylaw, and even if in past history, a general bylaw was amended, days before so that we got it, as Mr. Town Meeting Member Funling said, that would give us the opportunity. But right now, we do not have an article that we can amend that was submitted by the selectmen. That does not exist in front of us. We have a recommendation that was written by the warrant committee, which it's not their job to write articles, which was something that town council repeatedly told us over the years. Whenever we had an article that came before the select board that was not in good order, it was either voted up, down, or deferred. And the comment was, it's not the town's job to write the article. And so the select board should be held to the same standard of anyone submitting an article under our general bylaws.
And what would you like to do, Ms. Agostino? I've answered the point of order, which maybe I'll more formally answer it, which is that I believe there's an article in the warrant that I saw it. There's a phrase, act on anything related thereto. So the article is out there, approved by the select board. Its quality is up to you. Now, to the amendment, or rather the recommendation of the warrant committee, which is the motion on the floor, they've now made a motion that I believe, based on my read, is within the scope of the article, because I understand the intent of what the article was trying to write, and there's the phrase, and act on anything related thereto. Hang on before I answer someone else's point of order. I'm just going to finish my sentence. So what I will do is I'm declaring that this recommendation from the warrant committee is within the scope of the article. I'll stop with that. If you'd like to hear town council's point on this point of order, happy to do so, but that's my judgment here.
That's what I was asking for both town council and the select board to address the key points that I've made from the past history of how articles are amended. And when you, as the moderator, just to be clear, when town council answers the question, when we amend something, we're amending the article, and then the warrant committee takes a vote on whether it's a friendly amendment or not, correct?
No, you're actually, according to our rules, the recommendation of the warrant committee
Is the vote.
Is the motion on the floor. The article is never the motion. So for example, if this had come out, like most towns don't actually put recommendations in their warrant. They just have the articles. And then the first order of business is someone rises from the floor, typically their warrant or finance committee, and they move to do something with the article. The warrant committee recommendation, that's our first motion in town meeting. So we're actually not modifying the article ever. We're always modifying the recommendation before you, because it's the motion on the floor.
You're stating that we never amend the article. I know we vote the recommendation, but when we've made amendments, we do amend articles, and then the recommendation follows that.
No, the process is, according to the rules of town meeting time and our bylaws, we actually don't amend the article. You are amending the motion on the floor, which is the recommendation of the warrant committee. So with that, I've made that point. Now, Ms. Agostino, Mr. Walsh is also raising a point of order. Perhaps I go to him, and then we can also, if we still need to get town council, happy to have town council answer these points.
Yes, I'd like both town council and the board of selectmen to address the issues with the submitting an article based on the existing general bylaws.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh, since he has a point of order, it would save us all time to have them all addressed at once.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Walsh, Precinct 8. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Terrific. So, Mr. Moderator, for the benefit of members over the last 3 or 4 years, I'd just like to clarify that I had the pleasure to serve as town moderator for 14 years preceding you, Mr. Moderator. And I wanted to hopefully provide some clarity for this and endorse your position. Sometimes it does get confusing, but the reality is the only motion that the town meeting votes on is the recommendation of the warrant committee. Sometimes articles are printed and the recommendation of the warrant committee is a verbatim restatement of the article. Oftentimes it's not a verbatim restatement and they add their positions. So the two things that seem to make the most sense are areas of concern are we able to move on the motion recommended by the warrant committee? That is the only thing we move on. I think that's clear as a bell, and I believe it is absolutely within order from years of experience. Secondly, is the motion or the recommendation of the warrant committee or any other recommendations to modify or make a motion to amend from the floor within the scope. And I think you appropriately, Mr. Moderator, have chosen it is within the scope. In fact, I would add that the town has known the substance of what was going to be before the town meeting tonight relevant to this article, not only for this meeting, but for the previous meeting. The substance was a change in the way the town warrants were going to be distributed or made available to the town, whether by print and delivered or some other means. Technicalities of how that would be handled and geniuses that, for example, members of the Board of Selectmen might recommend and be incorporated by the warrant committee or by the warrant committee might recommend, those are all just details that, in my opinion, and I believe, Mr. Moderator, you would find that town council on your own are well within the scope. So, in summary, I'm only trying to help. I believe the town is well aware of what we're voting on. I believe we vote on the recommendation. There's no question we vote on the recommendation of the warrant committee, and changes can be made several times even tonight. And as long as they remain within the scope, it's appropriate to move forward. And I sincerely believe it is appropriate to move forward with the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Why don't we go back to Ms. Agostino's just questions or answers she'd like on the point of order from the select board and from town council. Why don't we go to town council? So Mr. Freitag, are you there?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Moderator.
Yep, please go ahead.
Could I ask perhaps for Ms. Agostino just to reiterate what her question is? There's been a lot of discussion now, so I want to make sure I'm answering the exact question that she's asked, or questions.
Could we unmute Ms. No, she is unmuted. Ms. Agostino?
Yes, thank you, Town Council. Ooh, the first item was repeating town meeting members' friendly concern that the current existing bylaws require notification 14 days prior. So therefore, we did not meet this primary general bylaw regulation. The second item was that Article 8 has printed in the warrant, which was sent out 14 days prior, does not even identify the general bylaws, chapters, and sections as required in any article. And that's from my experience as a selectman and as a warrant committee member, approving articles for warrants. And then the third item, which has also, I think, been mentioned by other town meeting members, is that in the warrant, it must be noted who's submitting, and I believe even the moderator mentioned this, it must note who has submitted the article. I believe, and also that the options before us tonight are to vote this up, vote this down, or to defer. So we actually have more than two options of voting it up or down.
Okay, I'll take those questions in the following order. I believe question 1 and question 3 relate to what requirements are set forth in the bylaw. I think that the town moderator has already stated very clearly what is stated in the bylaw, what those requirements are. I have reviewed the bylaw, specifically chapters 2 and chapters 3, from which the moderator has quoted tonight. And I do not see anywhere within those chapters that the result of a failure of either the select board to identify itself as having submitted an article or the warrant committee's failure to provide a recommendation would result in the inability of town meeting to take up an article at town meeting. And in fact, just to pick up on what Mr. Walsh just said, I spoke with prior town council this evening before I came here, who had, as you are probably aware, about 30 years worth of experience at town meeting for Milton, and in fact could recall instances where the warrant committee was unable to reach a majority recommendation on an article, and they noted such in the warrant book. But if the effect was that the warrant book did not include a recommendation from the warrant committee. Nevertheless, those articles were taken up by town meeting and voted on. Regarding the contents of the article and the sufficiency of the article as distinct and separate from the recommendation, Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 10 provides in part that the warrant for all town meetings shall state the time and place of holding the meeting and the subjects to be acted upon thereat. And specifically, I would draw your attention to the last part of that sentence, the subjects to be acted upon thereat. The purpose of the warrant and the articles therein is to provide town residents with notice of what matters will be discussed at town meeting and what will be voted on at town meeting. There is no requirement in the general laws that I'm aware of that requires more than that. And in this instance, it is my opinion that the article as printed in the warrant and is before town meeting tonight does sufficiently identify the subjects to be acted upon. And in fact, it is entirely appropriate for it to do just that, because articles and recommendations, specifically recommendations to articles, are very commonly, and this sort of goes to your last question, Ms. Agostino, voted up or down or amended by town meeting members during town meeting. So it is important that during town meeting, the recommendation of town meeting can move within the scope of the article, just as it may tonight. And that leads me to responding to your final question. The options tonight for this article would be like any other article. It could be voted up, there could be a no vote, a yes vote, it could be referred, or it could be amended, so long as the amended recommendation fell within the scope of the article as printed in the warrant. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Agostino, Mr. Chinman's raised a point of order. Mr. Chinman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
I want to tag on what the town council just said and point out that there is a relevant bylaw that I don't think has been mentioned yet. And that would be Chapter 1 of the bylaws, General Bylaws of 1934, Section 9. It's short. I'll read the whole thing. Any or all of these bylaws may be repealed or amended, or other bylaws may be adopted at any town meeting, annual or special. An article containing the subject matter of the proposed change having been inserted in the warrant for such meeting. Now, we all got the warrant. It definitely had this subject matter in it. And the fact that the recommendation wasn't received until Sunday has nothing to do about whether this subject matter under our bylaws, that one I just read, has nothing to do with whether this is properly before town meeting.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Ms. Agostino, I see you've raised a point of order. Before I do that, you also asked for an answer by the select board to your points. So I'd like to hear, see if Ms. Collins has anything she'd like to say. Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Precinct 9. Mr. Moderator, actually, we would just like a few moments to confer. We have a couple of select board members who actually aren't with us, and we haven't had a chance to talk to them. May we have a few moments?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you.
By the way, our attendance peaked at about, I think 203. It's down to 199 right now. I'll just check in on our select board. Okay, I'd like to now recognize Chair of the Select Board, Melinda Collins. Ms. Collins, you're recognized. Hillary, could you go nudge them and let them know? I think they're still talking in there. I'd like to. Yep,
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. I won't reiterate the points that you've made and that Town Council has made, but I would like to provide a little explanation for why there was no recommendation. Warrant Committee was not able to get a quorum. It's been a difficult time, and it's a difficult time of year. And so there was no meeting in order to approve a recommendation to go in the warrant. And the printer's schedule was such that we had to get it in. They were going on vacation, and we literally would not have had warrants to send. So that's how that happened. And I admit it's regrettable, but the warrant committee has been working very hard, and they're just, with this compressed schedule between town meetings, it's been extremely challenging. And I do appreciate everybody's attention to detail, and we're going to work very hard so that things like this don't happen in the future, you know, such a deviation from the customary form. As far as the next step for this article, the board agrees that it's in our legislature's power to decide on its fate. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Agostino, I saw you were raising some points of order. I want to restate, as the moderator of this special town meeting duly elected by the town of Milton, I am ruling that this article and this recommendation by the warrant committee are suitable and within scope to be voted on in any of the 5 ways that town council and I laid out tonight. Do you have any other new points of order to raise?
My point of order is in your opening comments, Mr. Moderator. You read a Milton general bylaw section that stated the submitter of the article is required in the warrant, I believe.
I did. That's what the bylaws say, yes.
So my point of order is town council just negated that. He just said it's not required. However, I am getting text messages from those town meeting members who have my phone number, and town meeting member Melinda Collins' comments raised the concern. People are not, my concern is not that the warrant committee recommendation is missing. That is not, I am still at the issue that basically because the article and town council answered the question to the people who were concerned about the missing recommendation. A missing recommendation is not a concern. We often would have warrant committee does not have a recommendation. That's not a concern at all. But when you when you just write, amend the general bylaws to, and then you have other language, and then you say, and to act on anything related to, you have not even, and that's the point of order, and that's the question that did not get answered. However, you yourself did answer the second issue. So it's one, that the general bylaws, specifically the chapter and verse, are not listed. So therefore, as town council said, and to act on anything related thereto, you could basically amend any bylaw based on this. Not that we're going to. However, I am trying to point out so many times it's a period here, a comma there, or a word there. And we do not have the article for 14,000, and that also you did confirm. Town residents did not receive that, who submitted the article, as well as the chapter and verse 14 days ahead. And those are points of order. And then once you and town council get together on the same answers, then I would like to address the question and make a motion.
Okay, I'll restate, as I said at the beginning, I saw 2 significant variances with bylaws. The submitting board was not printed in the warrant under the article. You're correct. Second, the recommendation of the warrant committee was not distributed to the houses in sufficient time before town meeting. You're correct about that. So we have 2 variances on this article and recommendation with the town bylaws. At this point, it is my decision that it's now up to you as town meeting members to take one of the 5 actions available to you, period. So, Ms. Agostino, at this point, I don't know if I recognized you. I recognized you for the point of order. I don't know if I recognized you as the first speaker.
Well, I was going to make a motion based on the answers to the point of order.
Okay.
So that we can move along.
Please state your motion.
My motion is to, once again, defer this article until the residents receive their 14 days notice regarding the 2 items that you did very succinctly clarify there, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, so perhaps to restate, you can refer it back to the submitting body, the select board. Is that what you would like to move?
Yes, did I forget to say that I want this referred back to the select board?
Just forgot the select board, right? Okay,
So,
understood.
right.
All right, I'll look in the Q&A. Is there a second to Ms. Agostino's motion to refer back to the select board? So someone, if you want a second, please type the word second into the Q&A. I see a second. Very good. Okay, we now are going to open debate on referring this back to the select board. We're not going to try to amend the recommendation or anything else, just should we refer it back? So if you don't want to talk about that, why don't you lower your hand? Otherwise, I will address the hands I see once everybody gets a moment to click lower their hand. Okay, and then in order, I see Mr. Furs, Ms. Hayden Sloan, and Mr. Walsh. Mr. Furs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Furs, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I just feel obligated and personally to come forward and say that I think it's really disappointing to me that we're arguing about green sheets and pink sheets here. This is how we work in Milton. We often have to make changes on the town meeting floor. If there are appropriate changes we need to make, we should consider them. This is a really good article. It's going to save the town money. It's good for the environment. And this is the second time we're pushing it back for what I would call a technicality. I would strongly urge this body to reject this motion and approve this article and move on with the evening. The comments by Melinda Collins, and thank you for the select board's work on this, actually goes to another point of why we should be doing this. We are trying to govern our town at the mercy of a printer's timeline. There's just no good reason not to move forward with this article, and I urge this body to push this through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furs. By the way, I'm seeing in the Q&A comments like move the question. That's a motion that comes before the body. If you wish to move the question, please signify by raising your hand, and I will recognize you in order. So with that, the next I see is, I think, Ms. O'Donnell, I know you were trying to raise your hand before. To raise this, I want to recognize Kathleen O'Donnell. If you could unmute, Ms. O'Donnell.
I'm looking for that. There we are.
There you go.
Kathleen O'Donnell, Precinct 7. I would like to move the question.
Okay, let me explain again what, according to our bylaws, move the question means. It means debate is limited at 5 minutes per individual, and a speaker can speak once. That's all it does. It doesn't call for a vote. It doesn't stop debate. If you would still like to do that, please confirm it, and we'll ask for a second.
I am sad that it doesn't go for a vote. In other towns it does, but I would still go ahead with it.
Okay, is there a second to vote on moving the question? There's a second. Okay, I am going to pardon me? We have a point of order. Ms. Agostino, you have a point of order on moving the question. Yes, you're recognized, Ms. Agostino.
Mr. Moderator, can you please clarify? I did see Kathleen, Town Meeting Member O'Donnell's move the question. However, we have a motion to defer. So can you clarify for our town meeting the order in that? Obviously, the motion takes precedence over moving a question since we have.
No, it does not. Sorry.
I've asked the moderator.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Yep.
please. Thank you. I'm just consulting my notes. Let me just check something and be right back. So the point of order in Ms. O'Donnell's moving the question, actually, according to our town meeting time, is actually most relevant to limiting debate. So Ms. O'Donnell, your motion on the table would be to limit debate on the motion to refer. And then would, if that motion passes or fails, your motion would then need to be remade again on the underlying article. But we have a valid motion to limit debate. I rule it takes precedence over the motion to refer. So let's go to put up a poll. We're now going to vote on the motion to limit debate to 5 minutes and on this motion to refer, and the speaker may only speak once. So that's been made and seconded. Can we put up the poll? So all in favor of limiting debate to 5 minutes with a speaker speaking once, please signify by voting yes. All in favor, vote no. All opposed, please abstain. Please remember to click submit. Can we open up the phone lines for the phones? All in favor of limiting debate, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. We can mute the phones. And this requires a 2/3 vote. We can close the poll and put up the results. The vote is 86% yes, 13% no, 1% abstain. So the motion to limit to 5 minutes and a single comment per speaker is in effect. So with that, I now see on the list, again, we are, if you want to speak to the motion to refer, I see Ms. Hayden Sloan, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Carr, Mr. Whiteside. Ms. Hayden Sloan, you're recognized.
Priscilla Hayden Sloan, Precinct 10. I understand that town government is looking to save money on mailing and paper copies. I think this is a worthy goal. However, it feels arbitrary to select the warrant, perhaps versus the annual town report, which was 297 pages, and our household received 2 copies of the annual report in the mail. I'd like to see this referred back to the select board to evaluate all mailings that the town is doing and prioritize for reduction in paper versus informing the residents of the town on issues that they may want to engage in dialogue on. I believe it's an issue of accessibility, especially for new residents, which our precinct sees a higher turnover rate. It requires a continual effort to educate our neighbors, not only how and where to register to vote, but the issues that face the town and the process of becoming informed to participate. So this puts an increased burden on town meeting members to educate their constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I'll recognize Brian Walsh. Mr. Walsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Walsh, town meeting member, Precinct 8. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to endorse the comments made by fellow town meeting member, Mr. Perez, earlier, and I rise to strongly oppose this motion to defer. This is the second town meeting that we have had the discussion about this, and you know, our democracy and our town meeting are not perfect. The previous speaker made an interesting point. We probably shouldn't be mailing the annual reports. But rather than saying, okay, we're taking one right step, hold on that till we take a better step, doesn't sway me. This is the motion before us. It will have a positive effect on the town. It has been considered and debated, and I strongly recommend that we vote down this motion to refer.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Carr, you're recognized. You have to unmute, Mr. Carr.
Hello.
We can hear you. Yep.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I'm Henry Carr from Precinct 10, and I'm just curious, how much does it actually cost the town to send out these warrants? And I think that there's a pittance in the town budget. I'm worried that number of people who do not have computers cannot access this stuff, although you say that the elderly people might not pay attention, but they do. And I think that it's very important that they get informed via the mail. And that's a tradition that has been throughout Milton for a number of years. So anyways, I just want to say I'm against stopping the electronic issuance of warrants. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll also have recognize Melinda Collins to answer your question on printing costs for the warrant. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Melinda Collins, Town Meeting Member 9. Town meeting members receive the annual report. All residents do not receive the annual report. However, I agree, as I think the whole board does, that it's prudent for the town to evaluate mailings to residents and to cut any waste and make some good judgments about what still needs to be mailed by on paper. So as far as elderly, I don't think that age has anything to do with whether one pays attention to what is happening in our town. I know lots of people of all ages who are very engaged. And access is very important. The board completely agrees. And I've talked with a couple of town meeting members who helped write this revised recommendation. And they've agreed to help us with our education campaign. Some of the things that I personally would like to see done are to really take this opportunity to make some videos and engage people maybe with a postcard to really get out there and let people know how their government works. I've been in a couple of exchanges lately where people have said, what is the warrant? What is town meeting? Can you explain how our government works? And this has really highlighted for me that this is a great opportunity. While we're modernizing and updating, we need to reach people in new ways, but also, as Ms. Sloan said, we have people who can't even figure out which polling place they have. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to educate people, and it's not just going to be here, you can either get the warrant in this way or that way. But people will be able to get paper copies, again, at the COA, at Town Hall, at the library. And I'm sure that if somebody called and said, I can't get out, I really need a copy, I know they would get mailed a copy. But again, you have that 1 year period to write in and say that you still want a paper copy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whiteside, you're recognized. You just have to unmute, sir, as soon as the button appears. Mr. Whiteside, if you just jiggle your mouse or touch your mouse pad, your unmute button should appear. It looks like you're having trouble. Why don't we go to a next speaker and see if you can resolve it. Recognize Ms. Milbauer, and also after that we have Mr. King and Mr. Ebong. Ms. Milbauer, you're recognized.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I think it's really, so I'm Deborah Milbauer, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Member. I want to urge a vote no on this. Are we still debating referring it back?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I would like to request that we don't refer it back, so vote no on referring it back. I think it's pretty straightforward. We either want copies, some form of email or not, and I believe very strongly that it should be hard copy mailed, so I don't want this to go back for more debate, and I will offer more information when we get to the actual vote.
Thank you. Mr. Whiteside, as soon as you are able to unmute, just go ahead and do so, and I will recognize you, but I don't see you unmuting yet. You may have an issue. Can you send a quick email, Mr. Whiteside, to mike@miltonaccesstv.org if you're not seeing your unmute button? And meanwhile, we'll go to Mr. Ebong. Mr. Ebong, you're recognized.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
I'd like to ask a question. Ibong Aqua, Ibong Precinct 4. I'd like to find out if it's possible to have those who do not want the paper mail opt out instead of having those who want the paper mail to request it.
Well, sir, could I ask that we hold that question until we are finished with this motion to refer and we go back to the main article? Because you're now talking about modifying something that we're not debating quite yet.
The answer to that question would advise my voting on this particular, would advise me on how to vote on the particular vote that's before us.
Then I understand. Okay, then I'll recognize the Chair of the Select Board, Belinda Collins.
Mr. Moderator, could we just have a moment to confer, please?
Yes.
Oh, actually, first, could I just answer? I apologize. I did not answer the question about the cost. So the cost is $23,000 a year. And while I agree in a $111,000 budget, which we had last year, it does seem small. But Member Wells, actually, in our last meeting, reminded me that that's half a clerk's salary. So it may seem insignificant, but I think there are a number of different ways to look at that data point. Thank you.
Now you're going to answer Mr. Ebong's. Oh, you have to confer on Mr.
I do. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
While they are doing that, Mr. Ebong, if you wouldn't mind, I may go to Ms. Agostino, who's now going to offer her comments after the motion was made and seconded. And then we'll come back to you as soon as the Select Board is ready to answer your question. I'll come back to you, Mr. Ebong. I'm doing this in the interest of time. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, you mentioned the name King. I don't know if you missed, did you say there was a town meeting member King after Milburn and before Yvonne?
They've lowered their hand. They've lowered their hand. Yep.
Okay. I just want to clarify once again that this is not about the warrant committee's recommendation missing, which is what town council addressed. That was not my question. That is not my concern. And my concern, you know, having spent almost 40 years on all these different committees, watching what happens with regards to articles, the concern is, once again, that the language of the article should have been done by the selectmen, and it should have specified the general bylaw, chapter 2, sections 1 and 4. Therefore, when you look at the last sentence, and to act on anything related thereto, any amendments related to those could have been made. And that's what the town moderator has confirmed. That, as well as, more importantly, under an additional general bylaw that the town moderator mentioned, that who was the submitting authority is a requirement. So it doesn't sound like much, but if we don't abide by our own general bylaws when we're changing them, then the language has so many town meeting members stand up and say, you know, there's a period missing here, there's a comma there, there's a word here. All of those are important. And this was referred back, you know, some time ago because there were other ideas that were even getting some tonight. This is a worthwhile article. I hope that those who want to vote no would refer it back. So maybe any suggestions you have. Town meeting member Sloan, her recommendation was very good, as well as the fact that it reminded me, one of the comments I made last time had to do with accessibility for the disabled. Has the chair of the Commission on disability. I want to make sure, and my commission wants to make sure that these documents are accessible to all residents, no matter what their disability is. So those were some of the items that still haven't been addressed. And by referring it back, we can make this better. I know we can come back again. I could resubmit it, or we could get 10 residents once again. But we've already done enough of the groundwork for the Board of Selectmen to put together a committee. And I totally agree with what Town Meeting Member Collins mentioned, to use this whole ordeal, shall we say, tonight as an educational tool for where we're going to go in the future to have residents more involved. I know, Mr. Moderator, you've been concerned that we have such a low turnout. We do get a quorum, but having a low turnout for town meeting. And all of this could be wrapped up in this article. And by referring it back, we're not killing the article. And we are not saying, oh, this should be, should be voted whether or not we have green sheets, pink sheets. That's not the issue. It's clearly in the Milton General Bylaws, Chapter 2, that you've got the 14-day requirement, and it also has to list who the submitting authority is. Those, in the future, no matter who's sitting at town meeting or who's submitting articles, because if it's 10 residents that have an equally important article and yet they miss something, you can be sure it's going to be deferred or it's going to be voted down. And I really don't want to see us vote this down. I want to see us make this article better by actually working together to make sure all the dates are correct. I mean, we've got 17 months. Right there, we've got our answer to why it can easily be referred back, and that the arguments about the pink and the green sheets have nothing to do with the argument that we're not abiding by our own general bylaws by passing an article that didn't meet the criteria. So thank you for your patience, everyone. And I strongly request that it'll become more educational by referring it back and having it again on next year's town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. And if we can go to Ms. Collins, if you're ready. Ms. Collins, if I could just make one point. Just for the members, I know Ms. Agostino was being complimentary to another member. One of our traditions in town meeting is to avoid referring to other members by name, whether in any tone. And I know it was meant in the best of intentions. If we could all just remember that, it helps keep things calm and polite. With that, Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Wanda Collins, Precinct 9. And thank you for that reminder. I needed it too. So, Mr. Ebong, sorry, I just did it again.
Well, you're directly answering his question. That's okay.
Yes, okay.
He's standing right in front of you virtually.
The board had that idea brought forward and considered it and has decided not to support it at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Mr. Rebong, your follow-up with your oath. If you'd like to
Is it possible to give us more details on why the board chose this path as against the other?
Ms. Collins?
Yes. So generally, opt-outs don't really result in people, the ability to opt out of having the paper copy. When you're opting out of something, or people often don't do that, or do I have it backwards? If we let people say, I don't want a paper copy anymore, the path of least resistance is to do nothing, because they know they can get the electronic copy, and the paper copy will come, but they're free to ignore it. So that's why, and that's something that's been studied in even in marketing, that those systems don't really work, and then therefore you don't get the environmental and financial savings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ebong. The last speaker I see is Mr. Mahalchek. Mr. Mahalchek, you're recognized.
Hi, Mike Mahalchik, Precinct 7. I've been listening to all the points of order and moving the questions, and this long debate about this. And I just feel like, when I moved here from Dorchester in 1989, I thought it was really cool that I got the warrant and that the town government was opening its books, so to speak, to me as a new resident. And because of that, I wound up running for town meeting and I served on the warrant committee. It was an advertisement for direct democracy. And I was really happy to hear Select Board Member Collins say that, postcards might be going out or videos. And I think I'm just concerned that the emailing of the existing warrant will join a vast cloud of spam in servers worldwide that no one will pay attention to, and it'll weaken the connection with the town. So I agree that we should vote yes on referring this back for more study because it's a bigger question than just saving $24,000. There's probably a better way to present what the town is doing. And I'd like to have people, hell, I'll help sit on a committee to decide how to do that. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, I still see Mr. Walker and Mr. Johnson. Mr. Walker, you're recognized on the motion to refer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I urge a no vote on this motion to refer and would support that with a brief chronology. This matter was discussed at length on June 15th, and I was one of the individuals who participated in that discussion and actually submitted some amendments which generated a fair amount of discussion before ruling that one was out of scope. Then we received a warrant, which the vote there at the June 15th meeting was to refer back to the select board. Then we received a warrant with the article with the exact same language. So I would acknowledge the process issues that have been discussed exhaustively, but there wasn't any question about who the submitter of the article was, since we had discussed it at length and referred it back to the select board, and the language was exactly the same. So here we are this evening, and I think the point that hasn't been made here is that not only was there robust discussion, but there were a number of points that were raised by me and others that have been addressed. The selectmen have been responsive here. One of the requests that I and others made was that residents should be afforded a choice, that they shouldn't be told without any option to do otherwise, that they would receive an electronic copy. They should have a choice. And the selectmen have been responsive here. The language allows that. In addition, there was a robust discussion, as there has been tonight, about the need for education. So there's now a period during which those of us who are town meeting members who are interested in doing that kind of education, and this is much broader than simply the warrant. It's educating people about our form of town government, the importance that the warrant plays in that, and just as importantly, how they can become more active participants in town government. So I believe that, one, the select board has been responsive here. We should acknowledge that. And two, we have the tools that we need to move forward. And yes, there may be some other good ideas about how to do other mailings, but I really think that at this point, we should move this forward. So I am strongly urging a no vote on this motion and a yes vote on the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Recognize Scott Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you're recognized.
Good evening. It seems like there's a couple of issues of concern here.
Mr. Johnson, could you state your name and precinct for the body?
Scott Johnson, Precinct 9.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to state for the record that I am pro paperless warrants. I think it's a prudent decision. However, there seems to be a lot of people that are upset with the opt-in feature of paper because unfortunately, it's like marketing. I own a company and we've done some opt-outs and the clientele has been irate when we do it. We've stopped as a matter of policy from doing it. So the problem here is that most people, I think there are some people, many people are concerned that these people are going to feel like this is being forced on them. What about the possibility of literally doing a mailing or presenting an amendment where you do a mailing where people actually get a chance to vote directly as to whether they want paperless or paper? And I think the vast majority of people are going to go paperless anyway. So we'll achieve the goal of saving the money and getting things online. But at the same time, people won't be offended because they will have had a choice rather than people that aren't as totally computer literate having to go down or not know that it's happening. And then I can just see what's going to happen in 2021 when they say, I didn't know. So just a possibility. I'm just suggesting that might be a nice way to tactfully get out of this whole dilemma and still get this thing moving forward and get the result we want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. By the way, that's something that could be considered if this motion to refer fails. It would go back to the discussion of the main recommendation, but thank you for your points. I see no other hands being raised, so at this point I'm going to call for the vote. This is a vote on the motion to refer. If we could put up the polling question. You are voting yes if you want to refer this back to the select board, no if you do not want to refer this back to the select board and you want to now debate the merits of the recommendation. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. Abstaining, please click abstain. Please click submit at the end. Can we unmute the phones? On the phones in favor of the motion to refer, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. We can mute the phones. I think we can close the poll and put up the results. So it's a majority motion. The motion fails. The yeses are 35%, the noes are 64%, the abstains are 1%. So with that, the motion to refer failed. We are back to now discussing the main motion on the floor. And by my interpretation, the motion to limit debate referred to the motion refer. That motion is over. We're now back to our original rules, which is a 10-minute limit, and you can only speak the second time if there are no other speakers. Perhaps the members could just self-observe their 5-minute limit tonight, as it's already 9:40 and we're on our second article or so. By the way, I see Ms. Swenson is raising a point. Mr. Whiteside had microphone issues, so Ms. Swenson is offering to speak in his behalf, and since he did have his hand raised early, I'll now recognize Ms. Swenson, who won't sound like Alex at all, but we'll overlook that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. I was able to talk to Alex on the phone, and Alex wanted to raise the point that residents who want a paper copy should not be limited to getting their request in before December 31st, 2021. He was thinking it should be ongoing so that when new people move into town or join town meeting, that they would be able to get their request in at a later date. He is suggesting that just strike the words on or before December 31st, 2021.
So he is making a, are you, well,
I
you're
guess I
here and
can
he's
make a
not.
motion for him.
You're making a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, could you just describe to me exactly again what you'd like to edit?
Yeah, I'd like to strike the words on or before December 31st, 2021.
Okay, so I'm now in the second paragraph of the recommendation, and I'm counting down, including the lines that are deleted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th line that starts with copy and the insert on or before December 31, 2021, your motion is to eliminate that.
Yes.
Okay, let me see if there's a second. There is a second. Okay, now that we have a motion made or seconded, we've had another point of order raised, and I'd like to recognize, because we'll come back to that, Ms. Swenson. Point of order raised. Can we recognize Mr. Leroy Walker? Unmute him.
Mr. Moderator, since I think there's been, we're very close to sufficient discussion on this motion, I'd like to move to call the question.
Again, call the question means limit 5-minute debate and speakers speak once.
Understood.
Understood. Okay, and there was a second. Actually, I haven't heard a second. Is there a second to call the question? Please note in the Q&A. There's a second. Okay, if we'll put up the poll. I think my poll, could we have someone else put up the poll? All in favor of calling the question / limiting debate, please signify by voting yes. Oppose, vote no. Abstain, vote abstain. And please click submit at the end. Can we unmute the phones? Before I do that for a minute, host, could you identify the speaker?
Yes, we're just trying to identify speaker who's calling in with the last 3 digits of their phone number as 088. Could you please identify yourself for the town clerk?
It's Jeff Stone.
Thank you.
With that, if we could unmute the phones. Yes. On the phone, all in favor of calling the question, please signify by saying aye.
Did you want anything else? Okay.
Aye.
Okay, well, stay tuned.
Opposed, no.
Bye.
No.
Thank you. Opposed, no. Thank you. Okay, we can mute the phones and close the poll. The results are the motion carries 86% yes, 11% no, 2% abstain. So debate is now limited to 5 minutes with each speaker speaking once. Ms. Swenson, I'll come back to you since we interrupted anything else you wanted to say about your motion that is now on the table here.
That we want, I thought eliminating those words on or before December 31st, 2021 would allow people to express their request on an ongoing basis. In other words, if new people came to town or new people joined town meeting, or if somebody decided to change their mind down the road, they would have the flexibility to do that.
Okay.
They would have the flexibility to request paper copies in the future on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I forgot to mention I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 5.
I should have pointed that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I see the chair of the select board, Ms. Collins, wishes to make a point. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Hello, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much for recognizing me. If you could just give us one more moment, we thought we were finished conferring and.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker. So I'd like to recognize Mr. Coyle on the motion to amend.
Jim Coyle, Precinct 7. I agree with what Ms. Swenson just said. I do support that, and I have something that to add that maybe could even be included in the same friendly motion. Is that I'd like to add in 2 locations. Rather than being restrictive on the places that we can leave the paper copies, I like to broaden that a little bit. And at the end of the second and the third, the third and the fourth paragraphs, add a new sentence in there saying that the town administrator may add more locations for distribution of paper copies of all warrants as needed. and the point is to give some leeway. Don't make this too rigid. Make it open, make it flexible for the benefit of the town.
So you're, the only way to accept your language now, Mr. Coyle, would be if Ms. Swenson accepted it as a friendly amendment to her amendment, because we can't take two amendments at a time.
Okay.
So Ms. Swenson, you're recognized to reply to Mr. Coyle's request.
I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Mr. Coyle, do you have that exact language? Again,
Yes,
let me try to get it correct.
Mr. Moderator, I sent you an email earlier today, and I also put it on the Q&A, the exact language, quite a while ago, but it's
Okay. Let me see if I can get that exact language here.
see if it was in the
Yes, I've got
Q&A
it.
at 8:14, if that helps.
Okay. So your friendly amendment, which I'll just read it out live to the audience. And Ms. Hoy, I just sent you an email with the language. So you want to put at the end of the third paragraph, that's the paragraph that starts with the words, the warrants for all elections. So as the new last sentence, you want to say, town administrator may add more locations for distribution of paper copies of all warrants as needed.
Right, and additionally, at the very end, there's a new sentence at the end of the next paragraph as well. I think it's needed in two places to be effective or consistent.
Okay, let's let the warrant committee clerk catch up with this. Let me go deal with her for a moment. Pardon me. Okay, the warrant committee clerk is going to put the language up. Let's see, Mr. Coyle, if we got it right. So there are the two paragraphs with your new sentences added. Are they correct?
Yes, they are.
Ms. Swenson, pardon me, now that you see the language, do you still accept this language as a friendly amendment to your motion to amend?
I do.
Very good. Okay. So folks, we have new language. With that, I'll move to Brian Walsh, speaking of the motion to amend.
Mr. Moderator, I apologize. I raised my hand to speak to the main motion, and it was still raised, I guess. I apologize. I hadn't.
Okay. We'll come back to you later. Again, if you only want to, we're speaking now on the motion to amend. If you don't want to speak to that, please click the raise hand and lower your hand. Other than that, I see Ms. Friedman-Hanna, Mr. Gordon, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. King. So Ms. Friedman-Hanna dropped. Mr. Gordon, your hand is raised. You're recognized. You just have to unmute on your end, Mr. Gordon. Mr. Gordon, you there? Can you unmute? Looks like he's having trouble. Why don't we come back to, nope, there you are, Mr. Gordon, I see you. Please go ahead. Mr. Gordon, we can't hear you. I think you're having some microphone issues. I can hear some tone, but not your voice. Tell you what, why don't you try to send an email to Mike at Milton Access TV, and he'll try to work out your issue, and we'll come back to you. Meanwhile, let's go to Mr. King. You're recognized.
Yes, Matt King, Precinct 4. I am in support of this amendment. The one-time opt-in seems quite unworkable. As said, what happens when people moved into town after that date? And also what happens when people move out of town or move within town? How does the mailing keep up with them? It seems like the one-time opt-in was probably added as a cost savings technique, and I think what it really hides, and I think this was brought up in the last town meeting, what it hides is that this is putting work on somebody's plate. And it's not clear to me whose plate that is, and that's a cost that's going to go against any savings of this article. In general, I'm in favor of the idea of the article. I have some other actual comments on the main article, and I'll wait for later on those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll recognize Mr. Johnson.
Scott Johnson, Precinct 9. I think this is a great compromise, and it's gives people an option that they can change their mind. Thank you and good evening.
That sets a record, 5.2 seconds. With that, Ms. Collins, are you ready to speak?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. Melinda Collins, Precinct 9. The board will accept this as a friendly amendment.
So you are in support of this?
We support it.
Okay, so at this point, you want to accept this as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
In that case, since you have accepted this as a friendly amendment, we do not need to vote on this as a body. So I see Ms. Swenson, your hand is still raised. However, you've already spoken once and we're under and your hand is down. So that's that. Okay, so we're now going to allow you to raise your hands back up. Now we're going to speak to this overall article for its, we're back to speaking to the article as amended. Town Council is flagging me on something. Please stand by. I forgot one step. We need to take a vote of the warrant committee on the friendly amendment, since it is their main motion. So my process apology. So Mr. Asher, could you poll your committee and let us know what your thoughts are on this friendly amendment?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Precinct 6, Town Meeting Member, Chair Warrant Committee. We are beginning that process now. We'll try to be back to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Chair Warrant Committee, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. unanimous support of the warrant committee in favor of this amendment.
Thank you. Okay, with that, would anyone like to speak now to this article? I see two hands, Mr. Walker, Mr. King. Mr. Walker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I just wanted to offer my appreciation to my fellow town meeting members. I think that you have collectively made this recommendation even better, and I strongly urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. King, by the way, one of the members has pointed out that we may have a small typo. Let me just go check something on the screen before I recognize.
Where?
Before I go to Mr. King, what I'd like to do is just recognize Select Board Chair Melinda Collins. She just pointed out one small wording change that I think they want to propose as, will accept as a friendly amendment if it's so moved. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Linda Collins, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. In the final sentence before Town Administrator, it seems that it's appropriate to add the word "the."
So in both sentences, at the end of chapter, paragraph 3, the end of chapter,
right.
Sorry, paragraph 4,
yes,
insert the word "the" before Town Administrator.
Right. Right. And also, it appears that between the words "for" and "distribution" should be "the" as well.
So the Town Administrator may add more locations for the distribution of paper copies of all warrants as needed.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so you are making a motion now to amend, and since you're the submitting authority, I assume you accept that as a friendly amendment to your own article. It's been seconded by Member Brian Walsh. So we have a friendly amendment. Warrant Committee, could you comment on your opinion of the acceptance of this friendly amendment, adding the word "the" in two places in two sentences?
Mr. Moderator, we will do this as rapidly as we can. We do have to take a roll call vote as this is a remote call, so we'll be back to as fast as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Agostino, can we recognize you so you can just make your point? I can't always track the Q&A going on, so we recognize Ms. Agostino so she can describe her point of order.
If you can, please make sure Warrant Committee Member Scott Johnson is having difficulty getting into the Warrant Committee. So he wrote, as a member of the Warrant Committee, how do I confer with the discussion? So I want to make sure that you're aware of that.
Yes. Mr. Johnson, why don't you contact, I think he's now in. Is that right, Ms.? You're emailing me, right? You're emailing Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, you're going to get an email. They've got a separate Zoom session set up so that the Warrant Committee can confer.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
George Asher, Precinct 6, Town Meeting Member, Chair Warrant Committee. The Warrant Committee unanimously accepts and recommends this change.
Thank you. All right, now we're back to Mr. King. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Matt King, Precinct 4. My other concern, besides sort of the hidden costs of this, which I guess, it will play out one way or the other. If the costs are bad, then we can readdress it. But the more substantial concern I have is that having to commit to print tends to force a good final draft. My fear is that if it's electronically delivered, there will be a tendency to continually revise, and there'll be less of a gate against that. And my question is, what mechanisms will be in place to track those changes?
To track the changes to
The electronically posted versions. Presumably, my fear is that the electronic versions can be changed very, very easily, and will just continue to be changed. So if there's no print, if the print serves as a record, will there be a record kept of changes made? That's my question. But in general, the concern that my concern is that, I think that less thought will be put into it because there'll be less pressure to do so.
Okay, thank you. With that question, we'll recognize Select Board Chair Melinda Collins, because as we stated earlier, the Select Board controls the warrant. Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A few things. Thank you for the question. So the warrant process does not change, and the warrant can't be changed once it's voted. It also has to be posted in the post office in accordance with the law, so that schedule will still hold. And all the changes, of course, will be tracked. That's part of the warrant process, and that will not be different. Also, we are printing paper copies. There are paper copies available in the Select Board office, in the COA, in the library. Also, every town meeting member will still get a paper copy. So that's really not going away, nor is the process. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I see no other hands raised. So at this point, we're going to vote on this recommendation as amended with the friendly amendment. So if we could put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. Abstaining, please vote abstain. Can we unmute the phones? On the phones, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. We can mute the phones. And we can close the poll. This article carries with a 76% yes vote, a 22% no vote, and a 2% abstain vote. So the article with a majority passes at 76%. With that, we will proceed to Article 9. Article 9, recommended that the town vote to accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 3, which leaves any balance remaining in a revolving fund established for the rental or lease of a municipal building or property surplus school building or surplus space within a school building in the revolving fund, and allows the expenditure of the fund for the upkeep and maintenance of any facility under the control of the Select Board starting in fiscal 2021, which begins on July 1, 2020. Does anyone wish to speak to this article and recommendation? I see Ms. Collins, your hand is raised. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So at the last town meeting, we established a revolving fund for rental properties, and this article will simply allow those funds to be carried over and then used for maintenance in future years. Thank you.
Thank you. I only see one hand is dropped. I see no other, I see one hand. Mr. Walker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. I'd just like a clarification on whether for the school buildings, for instance, where there's surplus space within a school building, whether the Select Board would oversee expenditure of those funds, or whether the school committee would oversee expenditure.
I will refer that to the select board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That depends upon who was named at the time the fund was created. So it just depends upon those documents. So if the school committee was named at that time, or was the originating authority, or the select board was, that's what would govern that.
I think that needs to be, I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Walker. You can have your follow-up. Yep.
Thanks. I think that needs to be clearer. So it might say under the control of the select board or the school committee. Because right now it seems to suggest that the select board has complete control there.
This was submitted by the select board. Yes. So do you have a specific?
Yes, I would add under the control of the select board or the school committee.
And where would you insert that language?
Right after, in the last line, right after select board, the words or the school committee.
I see. Okay. So, and it's been seconded by Brian Walsh. It's being typed up.
I would offer that
Live?
first as a friendly amendment.
Okay. So select board, I'll let you confer if you would like to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We would like to consider this.
Yes, we'll stand by. And perhaps warrant committee, you might start your process just in case.
Already, Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Chair Warrant Committee, already engaging.
Excellent. Yes, Ms. Agostino, I see you're raising a point of order. You're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, can you clarify? I thought the question asked who would have authority to expend the funds, unless I heard him wrong. Him being town meeting member Walker. Was that?
Mr. Walker, do you want to restate your question?
That was the question, and I think the friendly amendment addresses that.
Okay, thank you.
So my point of order is, if we read this, and allows the expenditure of the fund for the upkeep and maintenance of any facility under the control of the select board or the school committee. I'm not the English major here, but by putting it in there, aren't we referring back to the facility under the control of the select board or the school committee? And wouldn't it be the expenditure of the fund by the select board or the school committee for the upkeep? It's a technical question, and there should be a lawyer on this.
Why don't we stand by and I'll just update the select board. Hi, sorry for the delay. I'd like to recognize Select Board Chair Melinda Collins. Ms. Collins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have to ask a question. May I address
Yeah, please.
by name? Okay.
Yeah, please.
So, Mr. Walker, we would like to reject your friendly amendment, but would like to offer a follow-up that perhaps addresses your concern, which I thank you for bringing up. The suggestion is to strike everything on the third line, including the backslash, surplus school building or surplus space within a school building. Strike all of that, because this article really refers back to that revolving fund that we created at the last town meeting. And this is really just suggested language from the Division of Local Services, but it's unnecessary to this article. Right, because this article is only for municipal property. Excuse me.
Could we unmute Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, town meeting member, precinct 10. So as I understand it, you would strike from the backslash through surplus school building or surplus space within a school building. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's fine, and I would withdraw my friendly amendment.
Okay, so where we are at the moment is the submitting authority. The Select Board has recommended their own and accepted their own friendly amendment to this recommendation. So now, apologies, Mr. Asher, we have to go to you for a different question. Let's make sure we have the language up on the screen before we do that, just so everyone sees what it is. That's getting typed up now. So we'll just wait. Let me make sure I can see what you see. So Ms. Collins, does that accurately represent your request?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, thank you.
Very good. Okay, that is now the language before the body. We're waiting for the warrant committee. As soon as you're ready.
Mr. Moderator, we're taking this up as you speak.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, ladies and gents. Okay, ladies and gents. George, mute. Yeah, hang on. Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Precinct 6 Town Meeting Member, Chair Warrant Committee. Apologies when we're juggling a couple of devices, sometimes gets away, particularly at the hour. Warrant Committee unanimously supports the change.
Thank you. In that case, does anyone wish to now, so we have an amended recommendation of motion on the floor. Does anyone wish to speak to this recommendation? I see no hands raised right now. Very good. This requires a majority vote. If we'll put up the poll, please. All in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. Opposed, no. Abstain, please vote abstain. Please remember to click submit. Can we open up the phone lines? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can mute the phones and close the poll. The motion carries 92% yes, 6% no, and 2% abstain. Thank you. With that, we'll go to Article 10. Article 10 recommended that the town vote to accept Section 18B of Chapter 90 of the general laws, which would authorize the select board to establish designated safety zones on, at, or near any way in the town which is not a state highway, and with the approval of the Mass DOT Highway Division, if the same is a state highway, with a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. What I'd like to do is, I think, recognize Melinda Collins. Ms. Collins, do you have any opening comments on this, or wish to refer to any of your department heads?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. I will make a short opening statement, and then Chase Berkeley and Chief King are here if we have follow-up questions.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I think that we've all been privy to a lot of examples of difficult traffic patterns and having trouble crossing the street or riding our bicycles. And many of our public processes this year have noted that, including our traffic committee report. We continue to see these problems with resident safety and quality of life in relation to speed and traffic volume. And these are very real concerns in our neighborhoods. This provision of state law allows the town to designate safety zones similar to a K-8 school zone, but near places such as parks, senior centers, senior housing, hospitals, high schools, daycare centers. And while they don't solve the problems of traffic, they can help make it a safer place to walk and bike and drive to and from. These are areas of special concern, maybe with a little higher traffic volume. So, but any changes regarding traffic do go through the traffic committee first, and then onto the select board for adoption. And in addition, MassDOT has developed, that's Massachusetts Department of Transportation, has developed this set of criteria for adopting such safety zones. And regulatory speed limit signs are governed by Chapter 85, Section 2, and therefore require an engineering study to validate the posting of signage for a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So there are standards there as well that need to be met. Thank you.
Thank you. I see two speakers, Mr. Coyle and Mr. Matthews. Mr. Coyle, you're recognized.
Jim Coyle, Precinct 7. I'd like to add one candidate to your list of places. I think streets such as Washington Street and East Milton, which have school bus stops, should definitely be on this list here. That's a favorite cut through for a lot of traffic. I'm sure there are many others, but I think that analysis needs to be done, and look at all the school bus stops in all of Milton and see where it might be effective.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Matthews, you're recognized.
Thank you. Scott Matthews, town meeting member, Precinct 10. I wanted a little clarification on this because I remember a few years ago we voted on a similar article where we were saying 25 miles an hour. For that, there was some criteria on it in terms of tightly congested areas and business areas. And when there was debate about the signage, it was saying that we didn't have to put signs. It would be wherever it wasn't specifically stated of a different speed limit. So with this one, there doesn't seem to be any specific criteria. It seems to be saying, I'm getting the impression it's saying that we can put these signs wherever we want, or put these 20 miles per hour wherever we want, and according to select member Collins, we have to put signs up for the 20 miles per hour. So can someone give clarification on it? Did we see that there was a failure with the 25 mile per hour zone implementation, and that's why we're moving to this? And the differences between the criteria for the 25 miles per hour and this 20 miles per hour.
Understood. I think, Ms. Collins, if you agree, would you select between either Mr. Berkeley or Chief King to answer the question?
I think we can ask Chief King about that.
Okay.
If he wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Do we have Chief King on the line? There he is. Chief King, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The two distinct things. At the time, we could have adopted both these articles, and they chose, or I believe only one was on for adoption. That was like basically changed every street as a default to 25. This is a separate 20-mile-per-hour zones used in certain areas, and those certain areas have to have criteria of where the vulnerable use is. So, for example, about in a playground, about in a hospital, about in a council on age, and places like that. So it has no impact on what we did previously a couple of years ago, changing the speed limit from 30 to 25. This would be designated smaller safety zones in particular areas.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Has that addressed your two questions on process and difference?
I believe so. I believe what I heard was that the 25 is still in place for the criteria before. This is on top of it. And there are specific criteria, even though they're not listed here like they were in the 25 miles per hour article that we voted on some time ago. Is that correct?
Chief King?
That is correct. The criteria is just, it has to be a place where there's vulnerable users. There has to be an engineering study to do it. I can't comment as to why it was included and not included in the article, but that process would be handled through the Traffic Commission and then a recommendation to the Select Board.
Thank you. Very good. I see we have Mrs. King and Ms. Agostino. Mrs. King, you're recognized. Actually, yeah, please go ahead, Mrs. King.
Virginia Donahue King, Precinct 3. I had a completely different set of things that I was going to be talking about. I didn't know about the MassDOT standards. What I was going to propose is that we had, I was going to propose that we send it back to determine, to formulate a set of criteria that a street could or could not be lowered to 20 miles per hour. So I would like to, I'm trying to make a decision here, which I've been thinking about all day, and I thought I had it. So give me a moment. But I just feel that we have to define something that gives criteria for it. So if we because there are streets that are wider and narrower than others. There's densely settled areas. Visibility is different on different streets. Schools and parks we've talked about. So those are a lot of reasons not to have. If you have more visibility, you're not near a school and so forth. It's a better reason to not have a speed limit of 20. Which, by the way, today my mother needed to get out of the house, so I was a dutiful daughter and took her driving around. And I did my best to stay at 20 miles an hour. And it was very hard to do. I probably was more like at 25. But the responses that I got were a lot of shaking fists, people honking at me to get moving, people passing me in unsafe ways, and I was passed by bicycles all the time. So, I start to think about, gee, I can ride my bike that fast too, and am I going to get a ticket for riding my bike that fast when I can't drive a car that fast? So I'm actually against moving it down to 20 because I think that creates another whole set of problems with things moving in ways that people would not expect because they don't have that in other cities and towns. 20 miles an hour is not normal. So people will come in here and they could hit something that says 20 and just not know how to deal with it. So I think there's a lot of problems that could be caused by this, which, you know, would certainly be unsafe, and we have unintended consequences. So I was thinking I wanted to propose, you know, that like I said, that the criteria be determined, but I would perhaps be okay with it if something were mentioned in the article that said what those determining factors would be. And if that's in accordance with Mass dot highway, no, if that's in, whatever whoever has the guidelines in Mass dot for lowering to 20, I would honor that. But to be honest with you, I'm not in favor of 20 miles an hour at all. I think 25 is fine.
So it sounds like you don't have a specific motion, but you'd like some more elaboration on the criteria. And is this article covering those criteria, or including those criteria?
Yes, I want something specific in there to include the criteria. Otherwise, I would want, and I will make later, if that doesn't happen, I will make a suggestion or a move that we send it back until those criteria can be incorporated into a future article.
Okay, why don't I, thank you for that, Mrs. King. Why don't we go back to Select Board Chair Collins, and Ms. Collins, if you'd like to comment on this and pull in either Chief King or I think on this traffic issue, or perhaps
Yes.
to address your question.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think Chase Berkeley would be the proper person to talk to the criteria and why they don't actually belong in the recommendation. Thank you.
Mr. Berkeley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So in order for the town to establish a speed limit, we'd need to follow the Mass dot.
Mr. Berkeley, could you just identify your name and title for the audience?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, Chase Berkeley, Director of Public Works and Chair of the Traffic Commission. So in order for the town to post a speed limit, we need to follow the Mass DOT speed zoning manual. So these 3 minimum criteria for safety zones are already listed in that manual, which are it must be a 1/4 mile in length. The speed zone must be directly abutting the vulnerable pedestrian or other use that it's intended for, and that the zone may not cross a cross street unless that vulnerable use also crosses the cross street. So those criteria are already listed in the Mass DOT speed zoning manual.
Okay. Then with that, we'll let Ms. King decide if that is acceptable. We can come back to her later. Next, we have Ms. Agostino. You're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, Diane DiTullio Agostino, Precinct 9. For the second article in a row, I notice we have accept a section, which is generally capital S for a section of a law, Section 18B of Chapter 90 of the Massachusetts General Laws. Massachusetts was not in the prior article, and it's not in this article. However, in every other article where we discuss the general laws of the state, which we're accepting, we always identify it as the Massachusetts General Laws. And this almost goes back to my concern that we are very explicit when identifying the laws we're working on. So I'd appreciate a review of that issue in this article.
So you'd like me to confer with, you want to hear from town council that this is written correctly, or that do you want to propose language now?
No, it'd be quicker, I think. I'm trying to save time for town council to clarify that section should be capitalized, and that has in every other article in this warrant.
Oh.
Prior one should have done that. It would be the Massachusetts General Laws. That'd be quicker.
Okay, thank you. I will ask town council.
And then I had a question for the police chief.
Okay. So, Town Council, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, members of the town meeting. Certainly the intent of this article and the recommendation was to adopt the general law of the Commonwealth of
Mr.
Massachusetts.
Freitag, could you just identify your name and role for the
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Moderator. Kevin Freitag, Office of Town Council. Certainly the intent of the article and the recommendation was to adopt a general law of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I've seen it cited both ways in our bylaws, with and without, and certainly I think it's a matter of style sometimes, just citing generally. When you're within the Commonwealth, you may cite to the general laws, and the presumption is that you're citing to the general laws of the Commonwealth. But certainly if a motion were made to amend the recommendation to include Massachusetts, I would certainly find that to be within the scope of the article, and that would be my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Agostino.
Yes, generally, and looking through the previous town meeting member Diane DiTullio Agostino, Precinct 9, looking through the other articles, it generally does reference the word common, or would reference Commonwealth. Since it doesn't mention the Commonwealth, it'd be appropriate to amend it to the section would be a capital, and we would enter the word Massachusetts before general laws.
Would you like to offer that as a friendly amendment to the select board?
Yes.
Understood. Select board, do you wish to confer? By the way, is there a second on this for completeness? Am I missing a second? I don't see, I see a second, okay. We'll wait for the select board to confer.
We'll accept the friendly amendment.
Thank you. Warrant committee, would you confer?
Mr. Moderator, we're in that process.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Precinct 6, Town Meeting Member, Chair Warrant Committee. The Warrant Committee supports this unanimously.
Thank you. Ms. Agostino, you said you had a second question?
Yes, I have a follow-up for the Chief King, Town Meeting Member Diane DiTullio Agostino, Precinct 9. I am all for safety, especially with the cars living by Randolph Ave, which could not ever get near 20 miles an hour. And I would like to get some feedback on the chief as to how we are implementing and what we're seeing for numbers of ticketed parties, or an overall feeling for how he feels the 25 mile per hour speed limit is being impacted, because I do agree with the prior speaker that 20 miles per hour enforcing it. I have seen past cars on Highland Street stopped at stop signs more than on one occasion. So while I think it's all well meaningful, I'm very concerned adding more sections of just 20 miles an hour is going to cause issues that we're not going to see until the signs go up, and how the enforcement happens. So I'd like more information from the chief.
Chief King, can you answer Ms. Agostino's questions on the impact of the 25 miles an hour?
Sure, John King, Police Chief. You know, in some ways it's more difficult because it inherently increases the number of violations as you lower the speed limit. But in another sense, it's beneficial because it makes it easier for the officers to enforce because there's less wiggle room. In other words, if a car's going 30, 32 before, you were hesitant to stop them at a 30. Now it's in a 25 mile per hour limit. It's easier for the police to enforce some of the neighborhood complaints. We do believe it has slowed down traffic. Not everybody might feel that way, but obviously there's still plenty of streets where the speed limit is not 25. And it certainly doesn't apply to Randolph Ave, the area you referenced. But we have been able to enforce it. Traffic's lighter now due to COVID. So the last few months, it's inherently lower levels anyhow. The 20 will be difficult to enforce, but the problem with that is different than the 25. It's a slightly different nature. It's a short distance usually. So it's the distance in front of a playground or the distance in front of a medical facility. That's a trickier dynamic because you have cars going at one speed, suddenly drop, and then increase again a short distance later. Whether that's from 30 to 20 or 25 to 20, there's some confusion for motorists. There's a learning curve. Plenty of other communities have adopted this, but not all. So some people aren't. Lowering it to 25, I think, was an easier enforcement because it was a town-wide mechanism that by default applied to every street other than the ones we chose not to.
Thank you, Chief King. With that, one more speaker. I see Mr. Lambert. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. George Lambert, Town Meeting Member, District 7. My question is similar to Ms. Agostino's in that I'm curious what the rationale is for this decision. Since we moved the speed limit down to 25, have we seen pedestrians struck? Have we seen accidents? Just trying to understand why we're taking this extra step. I think if we all went out and drove around tomorrow at 20 miles an hour, it would seem comically slow on a regular day.
Thank you. Ms. Collins, I'll direct to you. Who would you like to answer or redirect?
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, thank you. I think this is a public safety question, so I would defer to Chief King.
Thank you, Chief King. You're recognized.
Thank you, John King, Police Chief. In terms of crashes and stuff like that, we still see them predominantly on the main roads, which most of them are not 25, so it really hasn't had much of an impact in terms of crash data. The 25 has applied mostly to streets where we get a lot of neighborhood complaints, but there are actually very few crashes generally. Pedestrians, you specifically mentioned, very rare we have a pedestrian struck. Extremely rare. We might have, a couple a year on average, and usually not serious accidents, but maybe 2 or 3. I don't have the exact number for that data. But in terms of 25, I don't know that I can say it's lowered crash data, and a confirmation of based not just our accidents, but the radar data we do around town. It consistently shows the side streets where we have a 25 mile per hour limit. The traffic tends to be in that 25 mile per hour zone. We have 27, we have 24. We don't tend to have much higher. Conversely, where the accidents show the main roads, where the radar data shows, Canton Ave, Central Ave, Randolph Ave, those are the streets that have accidents, and the radar confirms those are the streets where the averages are still high.
Thank you, Chief King. Mr. Lambert, did you have a follow-up for the chief?
No, sir.
Okay, I see you. My mistake. Last speaker I see is Mr. Dunn. Sir, you're recognized. And can you unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Dunn, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. I think people should understand that these are like school zones. You're talking about a couple hundred yards. They're going to be in front of parks, daycares, and senior centers. Like school zones, you're going to have signage. It's going to say safety zone coming up. You're in the safety zone, end of the safety zone. So I think people really need to understand that what we're really talking about here is a few hundred yards in a few places where we have these vulnerable populations. And to that point, there's a 2011 AAA Foundation for traffic safety study that looked at pedestrian car strikes and the risks of serious injury. At 23 miles an hour, a 30-year-old has a 25% chance of serious injury. A 70-year-old has a 50% chance. At 32 miles per hour, a 30-year-old has a 50% chance of serious injury. A 70-year-old has a 75% chance. And at 40 miles per hour, it's a 75% chance for a 30-year-old and a 96% chance for a 70-year-old. These safety zones are around places where you're going to have those vulnerable populations, children and older people. And I think that this is a very reasonable measure, something we're all familiar with because of the school zones, and it should be adopted by the town meeting so that we can protect these vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, I see no other speakers other than Mrs. King, who just dropped her hand. Nope, she's back. Okay, Ms. King, you come another bite at the apple. You're recognized.
Virginia Donahue King, Precinct 3. The last speaker spoke about that we all understand that this is for school zones and so forth, and places where there could be vulnerable people. And I hope that's true, but I don't see that from this article. I don't see that in the recommendation. So I propose that we add we modify the recommendation and add in what that handbook is that Mr. Barkley had referred to, the MassDOT Highway Handbook. I'm not sure exactly what it was. That the select board follow those guidelines within it to set these specific places where the speed limit would be 20 miles an hour. So without the name of that book, I'm not exactly sure what to say, but I would like to say would authorize the select board to establish designated safety zones on or at any way in the town, which is not a state highway, and with the approval of MassDOT Highway Division if the same is a state highway, and following the MassDOT highway guide for 20-mile-an-hour speed limit zones.
Okay, so let me, I will go confer with, I'll get on the phone with the Mr. Berkeley and the select board to get the right language. But the essence of, so you want to insert a phrase before the words with a speed limit of 20 miles per hour, something to the effect of that conforms with the requirements of insert book here, whatever that is. Is that what you're getting at?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
So that conforms with the requirements specified in whatever the name of the manual is.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let me just write that down. Okay, so I'm not going to ask the warrant committee clerk to type that up yet, but let me read this and then we'll see if we get a second on this language. So if you look at your recommendation, I'm counting down to the fifth line that says recommended, it says a highway division, if the same as the state highway, I see the point of order, highway division, if the same as the state highway, comma, and conforms with the rules of the manual we will get with a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. So that's the essence of the language. We'll go get the language done correctly. And we have a point of order now from Mr. Funling. So could we recognize Mr. Funling?
Yes, I'll be very brief. My point is that I understood that substantial amendments had to be submitted to the moderator by last Friday to make this virtual town meeting run smoother. Thank you.
Good point. I'm considering that when I'm looking at this, Mr. Funling. Let me just go take a pause, see if I can get this language right, and if it ends up being substantial or minor in narrowing. So your point's noted. I'll come back and answer it. Be right back. So let me get my video back on. Audience, 2 points. The select board is looking at the language that I think is fairly narrow and clarifying. So I believe it is, if Ms. King is okay with the language that we're going to show you in a minute once the select board confirms with me that they are ready. I think it would be an acceptable small change, Mr. Fundling, like some of the other smaller changes have been tonight. And if it gets more complex, then we'll have to reject the amendment. But at the moment, let's see what the select board comes back with.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
You recognize Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we would like to reject the friendly amendment, but offer something that we believe, though redundant, actually has the same effect. So if you'll look to the second line after safety zones, to insert comma, in accordance with guidance issued by Mass DOT, comma. The concern is that by naming that particular document, it could go away and leave us with a statute that is then not able to be used.
So I've got a point of order to address, but just, Ms. King, is this language recognizing your request? You'll need to unmute. Is Ms. King unmuted on our end? There you are.
I'm here. Hey, Donahue King. If we took that out, it wouldn't help me at all. I think that if Mass Dot goes away, at least we have a document that existed at the time that this was passed that would show the intent that was made, so that the selectmen would still have something to go by. So that I think that without having that, we have nothing in there to hang our hats on to know what it is that we're voting for. And it does need to be clarified. And I would also like to mention that I did in fact give, prior to town meeting starting, I gave Bob, our moderator, a list, a proposal for my recommendation, amendment to the recommendation, so that I should not be barred from doing something like this now, which is just a little bit different than what it was prior. And the reason it's changed is because now I know there's a handbook from the Mass Dot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. King. Let me just check something for a minute, and I'll come back to Mr. Mullen's point of order. Okay, I'll come back to Ms. King's point, but Mr. Mullen, you raised a point of order. Can we recognize Mr. Mullen?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. My point of order relates to the comment made by Mr. Fundling and by the moderator that there was some requirement that amendments be submitted in writing. I don't think that's one of our rules. We adopted certain rules at the beginning of the meeting. It's not included in those rules. I think it's a good policy. I think it's helpful. I think it's useful. but it's not a limitation on the authority of town meeting members to propose amendments to recommendations. And that if Ms. King wants to make a motion now, she should be permitted to do that. Thank you.
Okay. I think, by the way, let me check something. Rule number 6 says, pursuant to section 4 of chapter 2 of the town's bylaws, the moderator requires that all substantive or complex motions be reduced to writing and presented to the moderator before submission to the meeting. So what I've been trying to do is follow rule 6. Now, Ms. King, Mrs. King, pardon me if I'm getting the honorific wrong. I looked at what you sent me earlier. Primarily, it was a motion to refer. I didn't have your specific motion submitted in advance, and I don't have it now. So we have a couple other speakers that are here. So I can't accept a motion that I don't have language for. So if you want to, while I address some of these other speakers, if you want to write something out specifically that is narrow in scope, then we can take a look at it. But I can't just start making it up on the fly. So with that, I'm going to go, I see Ms. Collins, your hand is raised from the select board.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, thank you. The select board wishes to reject the friendly amendment, and I'll also withdraw ours. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go to Ms. Agostino. You're recognized.
Oops.
Town meeting member Diane DiTullio Agostino, precinct 9. Could the police chief, I know he's not the chair of the traffic commission, but he might be able to answer both questions. The first question is, will there be public hearing for residents to have input? Because I saw in the Q&A, one town meeting member raised, a lot of input from neighborhoods. So I'm wondering if the police chief will also have input, obviously as part of the traffic commission, but if there will be notices to residents for them to have their input. And if the chief could also, looking at section 18B, it refers us to the penalty under section 17. Can someone please advise us, would this be more than just a regular speeding ticket? Sometimes when you go through certain zones, it's twice the violation. So I'm interested in the penalty.
Chief King, can you answer those questions?
Yeah, as far as the first one, the determination of which streets and whether it meets the criteria would occur at the Traffic Commission with a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. All those Traffic Commission meetings are public. They are posted. I really don't want to overstep on the Chairman Berkeley, but to me, that is public input, and there will be plenty of opportunity for citizens to have input. As far as the penalty, Chapter 17 is 2 speed limit violations, 117 and 118, that the regular fees, so to speak, Diane. It is not like a construction zone or any of those ones that trigger a double or triple penalty. So it would be just a standard speed limit penalty.
Thank you, sir. I just see one other hand raised, and that's Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Leroy Walker, town meeting member, precinct 10. I had hoped to be asleep by now, but as proof that I'm still awake and alert, I agree with the assessment that it needs to be clearer both what the criteria are that the select board would use to establish these zones and what the source for those criteria would be. So I'm going to recommend a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, Ms. King, I promise to come back to you, and I think that's our last speaker. Ms. King, you're recognized.
Janine Donahue King, precinct 3. I'm going to move to amend the recommendation of the warrant committee to add the words in accordance with guidance issued by MassDOT as is currently in its handbook for criteria on lowering a speed limit to 20 miles per hour.
Okay. So, can you say that again? In accordance with guidance issued by MassDOT, and then from then?
Issued by MassDOT, and then adding also the words, as is currently in its handbook for criteria on changing speed limit to 20 miles per hour.
Okay, so let me see if I got that right. So in accordance with guidance issued by MassDOT, as is currently in its handbook for criteria for changing speed limits to 20 miles per hour.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second on this? There is a second on this. Are you offering this, asking about a friendly amendment? Because I think we know what the select board's going to say. Or I think we're putting this to a vote. I think we already heard the select board. We're going to have to put this to a vote. Pardon me, you just need to confer with the town clerk for a minute. Okay, by the way, folks, we're currently about 155 members right now. So if any of you are thinking of dropping off, please stay on. So let me go to the select board now. I don't think they're gonna, let me just check with them. Ms. Collins, would you accept this language as a friendly amendment?
No, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, is there any discussion on this motion to amend? Let me make sure it gets typed up correctly. Please pause. Warrant Committee, could I have your opinion on that friendly amendment that was offered while we're getting this language up?
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Precinct 6 Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Warrant Committee. We'll just take a formal vote, but our sense is, I'll convey that as soon as we have the formal vote.
Thank you. We're just about ready to get that language up. Let me just check. And I see we have Mr. Walker, Mr. Chinman, and Mr. Corcoran ready to speak. I may go to Mr. Chinman. Would you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm opposed to the proposed amendment. The article submitted and the recommendation made based on that article cites a specific section and chapter of the Massachusetts General Laws, and that the language that follows then tracks exactly that statute, which was passed by the Massachusetts legislature, that allows governmental entities to establish designated safety zones And if we start putting in our own criteria of what is a designated safety zone, it's already defined in the statute as something that they can do. They can't just go off on a bender and just start defining my driveway as a designated safety zone. It's in the statute, and then MassDOT promulgates regulations and guidance to put the statute in effect. We don't need to elaborate on a Massachusetts statute which specifically says a governmental entity can establish designated safety zones if they accept the provisions of that statute. And that's all we're doing, is we're saying that they can accept the provisions of that statute and start defining designated safety zones. I don't think any of this, it mucks it up. It doesn't follow the statute. And we already have a statute that other towns have used, have implemented, and there's no need for this.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Asher, do you have
Mr. Chair, Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Chair Warrant Committee, Precinct 6 Town Meeting Member. The Warrant Committee does not support this.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Corcoran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ned Corcoran, Precinct 3, and I am formerly the General Counsel of Mass DOT. The provision, all we're being asked to do here is to accept the provisions of the general law. And the only role that MassDOT plays is if we're trying to adopt a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on a portion of a state highway. MassDOT has no role in determining safety zones under the general law with respect to local roads. I would recommend rejection of the amendment and recommend approval of the article as drafted.
Thank you. And I see no other hands raised, so we're going to go to okay, Ms. King, you can get to speak again on your own motion. I think does anyone else wish to speak on this motion to amend? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Ms. King and we're going to go to a vote. If you wish to speak on this motion to amend, please raise your hand now. Seeing none, Ms. King, you're recognized.
Thank you. Ginny Donahue King, Precinct 3. It's actually not, it's not in the law. The reason that this was done is because it was brought up by somebody in our town who uses that to make determinations on what roads should have a lower speed limit and which shouldn't. And that is our director of the DPW. He made reference to that book. It seemed like a really smart thing to put that book in there so that we know what the criteria is. Because this article is not about changing any kind of speed limits on state highways. And that is the part that we talked to the MassDOT about. Not just regular criteria. I'm looking at the criteria that our town would be using to lower speed limits to 20 miles per hour. And that is what the person who's the chairman of the traffic commission says. So why does it not make sense to put that in there so that we know that we are not allowing our town to change all of the streets down to 20 miles per hour? Because quite frankly, back a couple of years ago when we did lower it to 25 miles per hour, the select board assured us at that time that that would not apply to all streets. And yet it kind of sounds like it is now. So this is something that needs to be in there so that we get to make decisions about the kind of town we live in. And if we know that they're going to make decisions based on something that we can put our hands on, which is that handbook that Mr. Barkley referred to, then that's great. Otherwise, why are we doing this? Otherwise, why are we giving power to something that might not make us happy, that might not get us to the safety zone that we want. We need to have criteria for this. And I don't think it's overly burdensome. I don't think it's redundant. I think it's something that limits what it is that we're looking at here. And we're only limiting it to what the select board says they want it to be. So I don't understand why it's not accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, with that, we're going to move to vote on the motion to amend per the language you see on your screen. Can we put up, it's a majority vote, can we put up the poll? All those in favor of the motion for the body, please signify by voting yes. Opposed, vote no. Abstaining, please vote abstain. Please click submit in the end. Do we have any callers on the phone? We have one. Can we unmute? All in favor of the motion on the phone, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. And we can close the poll. The yeses are 28%, the noes are 72%, the abstains are 1%. The motion fails. We're now back to the original language with one friendly amendment where we have the capital S in section and we have the word Massachusetts in general laws. If we can put the poll down, the results down. Does anyone wish to speak to this recommendation as amended? I see no hands. With that, we'll go to a vote. It requires a majority vote. We'll put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. Opposed, vote no. Abstain, please click abstain. Click submit when you're done. If we could unmute the phones, they are unmuted. In favor of the motion, the article motion, please signify by saying aye on the phone.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We can mute the phones. And we can close the poll. The recommendation passes 77% yes, 21% no, 2% abstain. With that, we've concluded the town's business. I'd like to do two things. One, again, thank the warrant committee for their continuing work and our hardworking warrant committee clerk here, Lynn Hoy, who's here in the Council on Aging with me. I'd like to thank the virtual town meeting committee again, Frank Schroth, Mike Lynch, Rob Mallett, Hillary Waite, Gail Neville. Also, the town clerk is here in the room with me. Thank you for all their help in making the meeting run. With that, I'll entertain a motion to dissolve. I see a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? I see, I'm waiting. I see a second. Motion. A motion to sleep, out of the purview of the town moderator. I see a second. Very good. Can we put up the poll? All in favor of the motion to dissolve, please signify by saying voting yes. No, vote no. To abstain, vote abstain. Please click submit at the end. Unmute the phones. On the phones in favor of motion to dissolve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. Let's close the poll. And the motion carries 97% yes, 2% no, 1% abstain. We are dissolved. Thank you for all your attention, staying up late and sticking with us on a long night and a couple nights. We will see you all at the next town meeting. Thanks very much. Good night.